We're all set.
Okay, thank you. All right, I will call to order the Personnel Committee meeting for the Washington County Board of Supervisors for the 9th of May, 2024. Can we have a motion to accept the minutes, please?
Sure.
Moved by Darrell, seconded by Brian. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Then we'll turn it over to Danielle, and we'll start with the staff.
Okay, I'll start with the straight back bills. County clerk had a senior recording index clerk vacate on May 9th due to a resignation, but she actually accepted another position in the county district attorney's office. In turn, this is cascade effect, so there's some promotions. Recording clerks vacating the position to move up to the senior recording index clerk. And the account clerk is promoting up to recording clerk. So in turn, it leaves a vacant account clerk position, which they're looking to fill. The district attorney had a legal assistant vacate on May 3rd due to a resignation. DPW had a highway worker 2 vacate on April 30th due to a retirement. In our office, a personnel assistant vacated due to a resignation. She's actually going to a position at the state. Social services had a caseworker vacate due to a resignation, and veterans had a motor vehicle operator part-time vacate due to resignation.
Hey, so do we have any questions on any of the straight backfill requests? Right.
So highway worker 2, is that the one we don't hire very often, or is that?
That's the one we do. We do.
1 is the one that is just a filler for if somebody gets demoted for a minute.
Yes.
And on the person going to the state out of your office, I assume was a step up. I mean, it must be really good for them, even if it hurts you.
Money and remote. So,
Ooh.
yeah,
Double whammy.
unfortunate for us, but for her.
Good for her, so, but we like to see that for our people too, so.
Any other questions? Hey, Danielle, then we move on to the staff and parent title degree.
So this one falls from the county clerk backfill request a little bit. The recording clerk position that is being vacated, that title I actually reclassified to a recording index clerk. So I do need a change to the staffing pattern to remove the recording clerk and add a recording index clerk. It's a title change for that. Also, yep,
You want to do those independently?
Yeah.
okay.
You'll move it.
I'll
Second.
do that.
Ryan and Jim. For seconds, is there any discussion? Dan?
Is that a, pay change?
No pay change.
Just
Same
title
grade,
change?
just
Any questions? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
And while I was cleaning up county clerk staffing pattern and the title by grade, I wanted to remove that recording clerk position, the index clerk position, and the senior recording clerk position from the title by grade schedule. Those titles will no longer be used because we actually combine those titles into one title. The recording clerk and the index clerk. And also the senior recording clerk is now senior recording index clerk. So I just wanted to remove those 3 titles from the title by grade.
And you need a resolution for that. Or no?
Yes.
By Brian, second by James. Darrell? Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
This next one is also due to the resignation in my office. I do want to, she was supposed to promote in July. So I'm actually going to hire the personnel assistant level, the base level for our department, rather than that higher level that she was supposed to be promoted to. So I just need to change the staffing pattern to keep the personnel assistant come July, due to that resignation of that position.
So that's a cost savings.
It is a cost savings.
We have a motion by Darrell, second, James.
Thanks.
But it never is.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
This one is for real property, so I do want to remove the assessor position since it's no longer being used. I think we should move that one first because I'm not sure about the next one, so.
Okay, and that was moved from government ops, right?
Yes, yes.
We have a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Harold, do we have a second? Brian, is there any discussion?
Is that one question, so our director there is comfortable with all this?
Any further questions? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, carried.
So that leads me to the data collector position, that once that position is vacated, I'm looking to remove that from the staffing pattern. Right now, it is a temporary person in there for that position to help out. But once she's gone, the position, we don't expect it to be back, so we wanted to remove that as well.
Motion, Jim, second by Jay.
Yeah, I have
Got
a
a
question. This was the cleanup, right? We didn't have these funded, correct? They were just.
She's pretty sure she's not gonna need it, it'll come the 25th.
Right.
Just to get caught up,
She's
hit
gonna.
the ground running.
Now, does that end regardless on, was it July 25th?
That is the date that,
I know
We
that's
have,
the date,
but-
but does it really end?
but
or
if it,
To be looked at? then?
If she has a need,
she would bring it.
she's gonna bring that, she'll bring that back to committee and ask for permission to extend that. But as of right now, it's July that position.
I think it's because of deadlines, and the deadlines, I think, are before that, so she should know.
We've had a staffing shortage in the department, a
Short
lot of
time.
turnover, and the director's new, so she's had an uphill battle so far. That should help.
Now, is that actually the person's job as data collector, or is she got it, or I don't know, he or she has a different overall, maybe?
It was
Position
a,
is data.
it was a part of the duties of the data collector that
Okay.
Priya's doing it.
But
She was here before as a data collector, so she's kind of helping out with the transition in the office to kind of help people.
There's
learn
also
that
other
position.
duties in that
Yeah.
position that take place in that office, that data collector.
It comes under the title.
Falls
So it's
under-
more than
Yeah.
just collecting data.
That's what I thought.
Okay, so what we're saying is that we would do a motion today to remove it effective the 25th of July of 24. And then we'd have to revoke that or go back in, and if it goes longer, we'd have to go ahead and approve it too. Right, so everybody comfortable with that? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, carried.
The next item is an addition to the agenda. It was just, adding the district attorney's salary to the exempt salary schedule for, $221,000. And that'll be brought up in finance too as
Yes.
well.
And that's gonna be retroactive, right?
To April.
And they didn't send any money for the increase this time? Or did they?
Correct.
Oh, Mr. King.
It's responsibility and we're back. Perfect.
And that position is on the finance agenda as well, like Danielle mentioned. And the reason for that increase is, the annual salary for the DA has to mirror that of the county judge.
It's mandated.
Yep, mandated, correct.
So I'll make a motion to refer to finance. Jim, do you have a second? Harold, any further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, carried.
So I just have some other items that are pretty much informational for you. The first one is the cancer prevention and action. It's a county lifestyle improvement opportunity, I feel. This is a policy with the Cancer Prevention and Action with the Glens Falls Hospital Promotional Center for us to partner with them to promote sun safety for our employees. So really, by signing the agreement, which would be through the County Lifestyle Improvement Program, we would collaborate with the Cancer Prevention and Action in supplying sun safety items for the employees so that they're protected when they're working outside. So it would be sunscreen, shirts, sunglasses, things like that. It's a grant through the Cancer Prevention and Action Agency there, and they just wanted to partner with us, so I thought it was a good thing to do.
So, how would that get distributed? Would we just set up distribution internal?
We would do it like in our office. We would work with the hospital to
Building.
get the items,
And then building grounds?
and we would get them out to whoever.
Whoever's out there that needs.
So are we buying them or are they?
They're buying them.
And Danielle, can you comment on your conversation with Sue from the Youth Bureau about?
Oh, yeah, Sue actually spoke with, the person here as well, and she was interested in it, so I actually, talked with Sue and said, why don't we combine it into a county as a whole through the lifestyle improvement program, so that all of the employees can have the opportunity to get these items.
Yeah,
So
just include like our lifeguards and
Yes.
our boat launch.
That's what I'm hoping,
all
yeah.
that sort of stuff. Super.
And it's good Youth Bureau can join because they're out doing the cemeteries and the painting and all the other things they do in the summertime.
How much is it, Corinne?
she didn't tell me there, it sounded like as much as we needed,
Well,
so I think she can supply us with.
No cost to the county.
No cost to the county.
And the agreement is just between you and them. It's not anything you, the chairman of the board,
Right,
sign.
right.
So I think she was just looking for voter support on this to go ahead and move forward with this. So we have a motion to do that. Ryan, Jim? Is there a second there as well? Any questions, discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
let me know when I can pick up weapons distribution.
Okay. So on the back of your agenda, we did write up the personnel office recruitment efforts from the beginning of the year. I'm not really going to go through all of it. I'll just touch on a couple of things. We did attend quite a few job fairs at BOCES and Sioux the Adirondack, talked to actually 10th through 12th graders in some of the places where they learn about civil service, and we're able to talk to Carly in our office about opportunities for them. And also we did have one at SUNY Adirondack, which was open to the public, so she was able to get out there and talk to people about positions here as well. And our job posting, so we are doing job postings through Indeed, through Handshake, and we're starting to get on the LinkedIn to promote more of our positions here in the county. So Indeed seems to work okay, but it's just okay. So we're looking for better options to place our positions out there. We did also meet with Black Dog, who will help us if we need to for marketing, promotion type things. Their knowledge helps us with that to kind of guide us in the direction we need to go. So just wanted to bring that up. Does anybody have questions or ideas on any of that recruitment?
Just gotta
Just keep
stay out.
plugging away.
Yeah. Gotta stay.
Would, haven't you said that our vacancy is lower than normal? Is that what the term, proper term?
Yeah, we're starting to fill the positions for us, which is good.
But you're gonna see a lot of turnover, like she just seen in her office.
Right.
State's really short on people, and our county people are,
And
ready
the
to pick off.
state- and the
Especially if they're
state's-
remote, they don't have to travel. We're gonna lose a lot.
Yeah, the state's pushing their health program too, the state health program, which allows people to be
Not test.
appointed and not test. So local health, which is what the counties have to follow, is a little bit different because we do have to submit information for a rules resolution. In order to get into that program, we have to be approved by the Civil Service Commission. So it takes a little longer for us to do that. I have started that with some of our titles. And hope to get a lot of them in that program, but it does take a couple months to
By
do.
design, they
so-
get to cherry pick before we're enrolled.
Right.
Exactly how it works.
Danielle, do you think it would be advantageous to set up a booth like the Washington County Fair?
We did do that last, was it last year?
Yes.
And yeah, we could do that again.
I think
We were, with the local development.
I know we did it in the past.
Yeah. So that was it for that.
Through the plan, traffic goes through there. One cat.
The last few things are just informational. There'll be retiree recognition this time at the board meeting on next Friday. I do have my Civil Service Association conference in June. It'll be in Saratoga. I did request in my budget for the ability to stay over with one of my staff members. I feel it's beneficial because the nighttime part of it is where you're kind of talking to all the personnel officers and staff across the state, so that's the, reasoning for that.
So, with that, why don't we go ahead and motion to do that? We have a motion to move for all minutes. Second. Cassie, Jim.
And we'll be in Saratoga during the Belmont, so that'll be interesting.
How'd you get a room?
Any money you want, any money you want has to come back to Ally.
Okay.
I want to tie that trip into recruiting as well.
Right.
Get a good tip to pay for it.
Yeah,
What is our policy on staying over? It used to be a distance involved. Should that be taken out? I mean, because we've kind of lost that mentality or whatnot because of the advantages of staying overnight, regardless of where it's at. So is that something that should be looked at and maybe readjusted?
We did. Yeah, actually, we just looked at that and that policy was just changed.
So you don't have to, right, anymore?
Right, the department heads used to have to bring it to committee to get approval,
Right.
to spend the night if it was within 60 miles
Right.
of the county building.
So why
That
did
was
she have to
changed.
get
I think just an
permission?
FYI, or
Yeah.
just to
Oh,
let you know the
okay.
conference is coming up. Yeah, should be staying.
And lastly is just to note that Safety Days is coming up too on June 11th and 12th down at the fairgrounds. We do hold a DPW wellness fair through CLIP at the same time, so. Just wanted that information out too.
does anyone else have any questions of Danielle? Personnel instructions? With that, we will adjourn this meeting. Adjourn, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for reminding us about policy change.
I thought we talked about it, and then I thought there was gonna be a resolution on it.
There might have been, had you not mentioned it. I'm glad.
There would have been, if you had mentioned it, but I couldn't remember if we had it or not, I said, well, they're doing it. They're not doing
Just watch out, Danielle, all those civil service, folks, they like to do tequila at night, so.
Yeah, you know it.
Has that been the service conferences? They're not that wild.
I might go again.
They're a little on the dry side.
I know, that's why I can imagine, but.
I've heard others.
Thank you.
I go, computer for you, computer for me, and then kill the poor hour. Well, this is good, but it's still in my car. And it now. Wait, oh, you changed it?
No, it's $4, what, it's 34, whatever. The delivery is worth that.
Where's my lunch? There you go.
Is that red?
It's.
We're their best recruitment team, because we pay them, they pay them more. than the
Need a motion to accept the April 11th minutes. By James, second by Dan, Daryl. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Okay. First up, it's the St. Paul roof replacement bid award. It's not here. He got one bid that was a disaster and lots of voted down. That's all I
He's
know.
not
about it.
looking to award the bid at this time, right? I think he's going to wait.
In the packet, eh?
Okay. So
It is, it says, mega.
So it was just the way it was done. He wants to rebid it, so I need a motion to reject the bid. By Sam, second by Cassie. James, any discussion? All in favor to reject the bid, say aye.
Aye.
Rejected, thank you. Next up is the treasurer.
Have mercy on your soul. You're unfortunately here a lot from me today, so we can we'll keep it as pleasant and enjoyable as possible. So the only thing on the monthly report that I wanted to share with you this morning, because we've got a lot on the agenda, is I always want to make sure that you get the updated sales tax sheet. So the deposit from this week was down a little bit, not surprised. I still don't have any gut feeling on where the year is going, but you know, to be almost $250,000 ahead of this time last year isn't the worst news, because you need this.
And gas prices are up.
So, you're gonna see, unfortunately, that's gonna, Mr. Campbell is correct, that if we see a little bump up on the next deposit, it might be because of the pain at the pump, so to speak. So, stay tuned and we'll see where it goes. We'll be having more conversations about sales tax in the near future, I'm sure. We'll move on to this lovely little packet. So I tried to ease your pain a little bit this year. And Brian and I normally schedule a whole separate finance meeting just to go over the annual financials. And out of respect to the board and your time, it's a lot of numbers thrown at you that you really probably just need to know the highlights and lowlights, right? So rather than bring you out a second time, just throw a bunch of numbers at you, I just wanted to kind of do a more concise overview of where we ended 2023, so that some of the other agenda items ahead of you today may make more sense having the financials in front of you first. So I hope this is a report that makes sense to you, and I hope that you appreciate not having to come back and hear me a second time. With that, let's get right into it. So your general fund highlights, sales tax, of course, is the biggest highlight of the year. It was $3.5 million over what we had budgeted. And, you know, for all intents and purposes, that is the number one, you know, highlight of 2023 for the county. We had a planned usage of $3 million of fund balance. And if you take out the interfund transfer to the capital projects that we did, we were actually at a $3 million surplus. So not only did we not use the 3 we planned on, we added 3. Because you remember, we took $5.7 million from 2022 surplus and transferred that out to the capital projects. And because we did that in 23, it shows an expense in 23. So when you look at my overview, you're gonna see that general fund is like a $2.3 million loss. And you're like, if your report says you have a $2.3 million loss, how come you're saying we have a $3 million surplus? It's because I netted out that $5 million sweep from 2022. So it's a little disingenuous to tell you that we had a loss when 5.7 million of it was actually just a transfer from 22. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that. The payroll breakage that we talk about, and this is a factor of those vacancies that you discussed a few minutes ago. But we had $1.2 million in payroll surplus not used last year. Now we have an amount every year in surplus through attrition, through retirements, through vacancies, but we had a few more than normal last year. But I think you'll see that number this year shrink considerably as we fill the staffing pattern. So it's good news that our departments are full, but don't count on that number again in 2024. There will always be a surplus, I feel, but I don't think it will be to this magnitude again in 24. As you're all aware, because I think some of you have also switched, we entered into a product with Glens Falls National called an Insured Cash Sweep account, where I'm able to take the county's money out of its checking account and move it freely between our checking account and an investment account that they then spread across other financial institutions. So they don't have to collateralize the money, wherein they save money and they pay me 5.12% in interest. So due to trying to maximize that as much as possible, we were $1 million over budget and $919,000 over 2022. So that was a significant impact on the county operations being able to do that. Not only did the Arrow Bank and its institution be able to save money on having to collateralize our money, we earned a little bit more to hopefully offset some tax pain in the future, right? So. General fund's fringe rate is actually 36.64%. And I'm not sad about that number because I think we've seen it as high as 45 and 46 in the past. Right,
So
so
back up to the third bullet, I'm sorry.
Supervisor, yes.
Oh, if you don't mind. Is that the sweet spot there? Where are we on that percentage?
So stay tuned, because we're gonna discuss.
Okay, all right, I'm sorry for interrupting.
So like I said, the purpose of this report was because we're gonna ask you some things this morning that it would be unfair to ask you without you having this basis,
All right,
in my opinion.
back down to bullet number, what, 6? Okay.
So we want between 20 and 25% to not circumvent your question.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted. Fringe rate.
Fringe rate, 36.64%. Again, we've run in the mid-40s. So it's not terrible. The 36% fringe rate isn't that bad, but however, the only footnote I'll talk about is later in this, we're gonna talk about the health insurance fund. So that fringe rate, I think, is probably gonna be a little bit higher in 2025, so stay tuned. The one item that I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on because it ends up going in circles sometimes. If any of you want to talk to me about it after the meeting, I'll gladly sit and walk you through it. One of the items that I report on every year that the supervisors just traditionally don't like. So there's a required book entry that I have to do. It's called a deferred tax revenue. And it's a measurement of how many outstanding taxes there are at year end versus your collections over the first 60 days in the succeeding year. So by not having a county auction, our tax receivable grew. And when your tax receivable grows, your deferred tax liability grows, which has an effect on your fund balance. You saw those of you that were here saw a huge impact when we had a $5.5 million unpaid tax in the town of Port Edward. And we had a significant, scary run on our fund balance for a couple of years. This number, I feel is important to share with you because it does two things. Number one, it artificially deflates your fund balance because it's not it's a book entry that I have to do, but it's not a real, there are taxes that you're either gonna get paid for or you're gonna sell the property at auction and hopefully at least recover your lien. So I don't particularly like this measure, but we're required to do it. The other thing that it does that drives most of you nuts traditionally is when you look at the levy number on my reports, it's not the amount that you levy. And it's because whatever that deferred tax revenue goes up, your tax revenue number goes down. So if you see that we had a $37 million levy and I'm only reporting 36.2 on my report, you're like, didn't we levy 37 million? Yes, we did. So traditionally, those are two things that the supervisors don't like because they're book entries that don't have a real basis in reality. I share it with you because those two questions usually come up. Why is this number not 37 million? And why is fund balance going down when you said we had a surplus? So that's the reason I share that, Supervisor Clerk.
On that one with the deferred tax revenue, does that only just include taxes or does it also include liens or debt on the property?
So our only lien is taxes. Yeah. So it's a matter of, it's a measurement of our unpaid taxes.
And going forward, it will probably never cover again.
In the world that we live in now, we are going to have to share the surpluses and eat all the deficits. So it's gonna be interesting to
It'll
see
never
how
break
that.
even. It's always gonna be a cost. There's no way to
As
ever.
we move closer to this year's auction, we may have other conversations about, do we want to set minimum bids for the first time? We'll have some conversations to try to protect the county the best we can, right? So there's a lot of new rules in place that we're gonna have to follow. What was nice is when I saw what came out of Albany, 90% of what we now have to do, we already did. So we traditionally have given more than the law required anyway. So a lot of the new stuff we're already in line to do because we already do. So the surplus piece is really the new piece for us. And the conferences and the payment, the partial payment plans. Again, I'm not gonna waste your time today on those, but those are two conversations we're gonna have in the very near future because they're new requirements that we haven't had to deal with before, other than the mandatories. And I just saw a typo in the report, which I don't like, and I thought.
Yeah, it's all right.
Take it out of your paper.
It'll probably upset the law, this paycheck.
You just can't spell delinquent, it just couldn't help.
Or significant. The next page is the recap of, it's a 4-year recap of general fund. It shows the assets, and liabilities, reserve fund balance, unreserved appropriated, unreserved, and then your total. So the important number for you all is the unreserved fund balance, the 22.8. That's the number that we have to work with when we're making decisions today or during the rest of 2023, or even into budgeting for 2025. So the unreserved appropriated, remember, that's a measurement of how much of fund balance we thought we were going to use in 2024. So that 3.3 is what we use to balance this year's budget. Now, again, the hope is always to not use it, right? That's always the hope. Sales tax needs to trend above budget. Payroll needs to trend below budget. Those two things happen, we usually do okay. But this is, that 3.3 is kind of what you decided at budget time was our almost worst case scenario. That's what we needed to get there. Again, you plan it and hope to not use it. I shared with you in each of the funds, the kind of their breakdown of their sources. In general fund, you'll see that there's 33% of general fund is funded by your tax levy. And I think that's an important number, followed by sales taxes. And local sources are things that are like departmental income, like when I do a tax search for somebody, or the DMV fees, stuff like that comes in as what we consider local sources. And then, of course, state and federal aid is, you're all familiar with those. So I always think it's important to show you, a lot of times we talk about the expense side, but I think it's important that you know how we're funded. Because it's really, especially if we're gonna start having conversations about sales tax and the implications of possibly looking at going to 8%, we need to know how that fits into how our government's funded. So, Mr. Shaw.
Yeah, on the state aid, funding and the federal aid funding, are those numbers trending flat or are they trending down from previous years?
I'd have to look at previous years. I've thought about doing that and I didn't want to clutter this up.
I know, but it's been mentioned how the state is cutting back on their funding and the federal government, I don't, so. I would do, that's why I asked the question, that would show it, right?
Before we adjourn, I could get that answer for you.
No, that's okay.
I don't have it off the top of my head. It's a fair question. Because I know the last time I looked at it, it wasn't trending as down as my heart was telling me it was. So they were actually giving them more money than I gave them credit for.
Just everything costs more.
Just everything costs more.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we always share with you the expenses by type. And, having a $31.7 million payroll is a number that, again, is something that's important to you when we're making decisions about not only the rest of this year, but moving into 25 and 26. And most of those pay increases that are ahead of you are contractual through the 5 bargaining units that we have. So we kind of know what those numbers are. We got 3-year contracts on most, and we've got 2 in play right now, I think, if I remember correctly. So stay tuned because the 2% that we're used to are kind of not, the contracts aren't settling at that number anymore. So we'll see where they go. The interfund transfer number is abnormally high this year because, again, remember that $5.7 million what we took from 2022 and moved out to the capital project is in that number. So that number isn't normally that high. That number is normally close to the $10 million that we give county road fund. a number that I'm supervisor, go ahead.
I was gonna ask, what are some of the biggest fringe items?
Health insurance. Without a hesitation, health insurance. And the retirement is ticking up, unfortunately, the wrong direction. So I think we paid 4.2 million this year on a retirement bill. It's not a small number anymore. When I started with the county in 1994, I think our retirement bill was $54,000. So it's weird for me having that historical view, paying a $4.2 million bill.
When you say retirement bill, is that what we're paying for employees?
Yes, sir. That's
Okay.
the county's
it's-
contribution to their retirement.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Supervisor. It was actually much larger because we had Pleasant Valley. Yeah. I can get the number for you.
Why was it so low?
The stock market, the way the stock market had increased, it was producing more money than, so basically nobody had a. Yeah, so nobody was depositing much, and your town levels, I think, even saw it worse. Cause when it increased here at the county, $1 million or $2 million, little towns were having to pay 50 and 100,000. It was huge in 2009, 10.
Your take as well.
Well, they also, so if memory serves, and I'm only going from memory, I also believe that the retirement fund was funded in the low 80s. And now I think the fund is funded at 98%. So the state comptroller has a much different view than the comptroller at that time about what a stable fund looks like. So the difference between 82% and 98% in the retirement fund is a huge number.
4.2 million the result of work market. Or was it?
No, because one of the things that the former county administrator and I could never wrap our heads around was they were earning 67% on the fund and paying out 3.5%, and the county's contribution was still going up. So we could never wrap our head around how the returns were bigger than the outlay, but we still had an increase in our contribution. So, and I've never been able to wrap my head around his philosophy on why that's necessary. I know he hires actuaries and they give him a number that they think the fund needs to sustain itself. But 98% funded means we could stop, everybody could retire today, and 98% of us would be able to receive a retirement check.
There's a couple of things in play too. The state probably employs a lot more. So the fund itself probably has a lot more people in it, even if our number isn't any higher. So the fund itself is bigger, and then it, like, they came with tier 5 and tier 6 to kind of slow down the increases.
Yeah.
But then this year, we just heard from Intercounty when I asked a question about tier 6, so they changed it. It looks like they're gonna try to go back and make it mimic tier 4 eventually. And if it does, everything that they put in as perceived savings are gonna be perceived costs. So just the changes they did this year, and there weren't only a couple, changed the rate 0.5% on tier 6 employees. So, yeah, it's not gonna get better, but they're doing it to try to hire and retain people too.
They realized that tier 6 was a mistake. The problem is, as they fix tier 6, our contribution is gonna reflect a more rich tier 6. So, do you have a question? No. Ms. Shaw.
Yes, the fringe of the 11.6, is that part of personal services or is that on top?
On top.
And where is your legacy cost in fringe, or is that on top of those who know?
Retiree health is in that number.
Okay. So we're at 43 million for actual cost of
Yes, sir.
employees
Yes. Sir. And legacy.
and legacy. Well, that's still
Sure.
part of the story.
Yeah, it is. The number that I'm happy about, I'd like it to be 0, but 571,000 isn't terrible. Our debt service, we've done a really good job here, in my opinion, of keeping our debt service under control and trying to pay cash when we can. Again, the $5.7 million that you contributed to capital kept us from borrowing for a barn. That's huge. Roy's going.
Didn't we borrow some at one point at less interest than what we were getting on our interest rates? So that's why you went ahead and borrow.
I can either confirm or deny that.
Okay, that's.
No, we did plan, the borrowing that we did plan it at very beneficial times. And right now, the biggest borrowing that we have is actually for the college, not for us. So as far as our internal needs, the only debt service we have out there right now, we borrowed for the roof over at Burgoyne Avenue. The bulk of that borrowing is actually against them building at ACC. Any questions on general fund? Like I said, this is a 10,000-foot view, making sure that you know where we are and the highlights and or lowlights if they exist. So that when you have to make some decisions today and for the rest of this year, that you've got some kind of basis on where we actually are.
Since you were on general fund borrowing, though, there is other borrowing as in sewer district and the highway too.
Yes,
So
sir.
we're borrowing for that too, so just so everyone knows.
Yep.
Because that all goes against our cap and that's a whole different story.
Yes, sir. So carpool is next. Biggest thing there's two things with carpool, and you'll hear this in a couple of the funds. So carpool did very well. And so far as it did receive more revenues by you guys deciding to adjust the rates. If you remember, we adjusted the rates for this year, for 2023, excuse me. And that showed in the revenues, fine, you know what I mean? The expenses still to keep our fleet in a healthy, stable environment is gonna require a little bit more. We're gonna have to definitely watch that as it goes through. I'm not recommending any drastic changes for 24 or 25. But I would encourage Deb Donahue and Brian to just keep their eye on carpool and just really be aware of making sure that we can support, because that fund in and of itself is supposed to be self-sustaining. And I think that one of the things to Deb Donahue's credit, she has really embraced the fiscal part of her operation as well. And she now is really starting to see that the carpool revenues, we had always looked at them as replacement costs for the vehicles. And she has seen the light where it's not just the vehicles. The carpool revenues have to also support the mechanics, their retirement costs. So there's those overhead costs to run that department are part of running that fund. So the fund is supposed to be self-sustaining. So I think one of the things that we aired in the past was we looked at how much would it take to replace a vehicle, not remembering that there's this whole other fixed cost above it that was never figured into the rate. I've begun conversations with Brian and Deb about, we spend a lot of staff time tracking miles and charging so many cents a mile and gas. And so I've thrown out a kind of outside of the box idea that maybe there could be a flat rate billing that, again, you know what your needs for next year are for the fund. What's a number based on the number of cars you have out that you need to do? This would be more for like your fleet cars. So if the department has a $50,000 car that you think they're gonna have for 10 years, then you know what that replacement cost of that car is gonna be. And you divide that by 12 and you would have a flat rate monthly rate instead of, well, this month Al's gonna pay $150, next month he's gonna pay $320. Like all this mileage tracking and then so much a mile. If the goal is to keep the fund sustainable and you know what your replacement cycle is, you can back into the annual number that you need to raise. And that's where we could expand the capital plan to actually show what that need is annually and do a flat rate billing and take hours of her staff time and let them do something more productive than tracking, right? So we've begun those conversations.
And we're still gonna know fuel and miles because it's
We
right at the pump.
still know it, still available.
Yeah.
So, and also the amount of like social services to get reimbursed for usage of the cars, that type of stuff.
Yes, sir.
Is that figured in this is figured into the interdepartment revenues increase?
Yes.
That's where that's located.
So that would be in the general fund. So this shows the money coming in from social services, but on the general fund side, that social services expense is offset by revenue.
Gotcha.
So it doesn't necessarily show in this fund, but any of the money in this fund from social services is reimbursed from the state and the general.
So, but it gets back there. It still makes its way back to the carpool.
No, it does not. Social services pays carpool. And that expense is offset by the state.
That's a flaw. If we aren't returning that.
Well, carpool's already getting the revenue from DSS.
Well, okay, we're saying the same thing in different language. I get it.
So while the expenses, appear to be down when you look at the financials for the year, I did want to note that there is a $459,000 open encumbrances at the end of the year. So you have to remember those when you're looking at it, because it looks like your expenses went from 1.5 to 1.1. However, if you take in consideration the encumbrances that are out there, and what those are is cards that they ordered in 23 that they won't get and pay for until 24. And what we do is we just roll that budget forward for them. So they'll use 23's budget, but the expense will show a 24. So even while the expenses look like they're down, you do have to remember that there's another $459,000 that are actually part of that number as well.
Was there a figure for that from 22 to 23?
It was.
You mean, is it included in that 1.1 number there? So you get what I mean?
So it's always skewed.
So,
It's always skewed. There we go. That's the word.
so it's always skewed, not necessarily to that level.
Okay,
I
Right.
can look it up, the encumbrances for 22 were much smaller. So yes, they are in that 1.1, but it was a much smaller number.
so there, then it would be less
Yes.
easy to say the
Well-
encumbrances were more than the average.
And it's even worse when you get to the highway trucks, because you get 2
Everything.
years in once.
And you figure that's on 1.2 million a pop. and
Yeah.
You get into the plow trucks. So. And you'll see that in just a minute.
Oh, relative.
Supervisor.
Chairman. So I know, I guess we're gonna marinate on that concept for Liverpool on flat rate. You know, back into the number divided by 12. I like the concept, right? I mean, it's a simple concept. We don't realize the overhead expense that we create for ourselves just so that we have all this data that may or may not really help us make a decision. I mean, there's cost in collecting data, always. If it doesn't help you make a decision, why are you collecting data?
So the big thing, I like the concept too myself. The one thing I don't want to lose track of is that if we start off where this department's doing this and then this department's doing that and it flip flops and you got this department paying for this department, that's where the problem would be. So we got to make sure we have enough data so that doesn't.
Right, you have to have enough data to make sure that
Long-
flat rate is paying for it.
Yes,
As long as if the only one who would pay it is the service.
right, that's, yeah.
Cannot,
You got
deny
That's
that.
a good. And with carpool and county road machine, you'll see I also gave you a page that reflects what the purchases were. So there's a page that shows what makes up that $1.1 million. And then right below that, it shows those things that make up the $459,000 encumbrance that'll be paid for this year. So I hadn't done this before, but I thought it might actually be useful to you to see what we actually bought. Right, sometimes because Deb reports on it, you know, in her committee, so you hear it in pieces, you know, we bought a truck this month, we bought a skid steer this month. So I wanted to give you kind of an overview, this is what we did last year. I think that's important to see what you invested in, right?
So I want to pull the string on that one more time though, so,
Yeah,
when do we need to? When do we need to kind of decide on this?
I would say probably for the 25 budget process would be the timing of
But
the,
we've got to get them to buy into it.
and
We
again,
need a lot of people's buy-in on this. Not just the boards. We have to work as a team to make
I would
that.
never
Right,
tell.
if they're
yeah.
trying to, if they spent this much effort trying to fix
Right,
carpool and then we throw another thing at them that tends not to work.
I would definitely want to work with the superintendent to make sure that she feels comfortable with a strategy change.
When you say back into it, would you look at our total costs on carpool
Yes, sir.
and then back through, make sure we had everything covered
Yes, sir.
and it'd be assigned such?
And you're gonna hear a philosophy like that later today in regards to the workers' comp fund. So it'll, if you let that marinate, you're gonna hear something similar in the near future.
Yeah, there's a lot of these things that are really related. The good news with the carpool one is this is something that Deb kind of, the philosophy fits where she's wanted to go. You just gotta make sure we're all on the same page with it before we try to
Right.
push it. It needs to flow on its own, not be enforced on anybody.
Like I said, I'm very lucky because Deb has really embraced the fiscal part of operation better than most, so.
Oh, and we need to war game to make sure we're following any traps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For ourselves.
The unintended consequences are always the ones that.
Yeah.
So, right.
I think that, last 3 years, there's been a lot of, vehicles coming in due to COVID money, looking at it carefully because there was so much, like, the supply chain was off, so they're switching through a couple of years because they get what we ordered. So hopefully that starts flattening out. And the overview that you and Deb and Melissa have done, it's given us enough data to trust that maybe it's at where it should be within a couple of years.
That's right.
I think it's really
Right.
important to keep that in mind because labor's money.
Well, last budget cycle, I think what I came to realize is, we gotta, the juice has gotta be worth the squeeze, we're impaling ourselves on $10,000, trying to find, I mean, that's good that we do that, but we gotta figure out.
Well, and like she came to us last month that she really needs to get these trucks ordered before July, before the price increase. Cause it's probably 2 years before you'll see them anyway. So why are you waiting till December to order something that you'll get in 2 years and just pay more money for it?
But you get some interest while you're waiting. It's not a bad thing. right?
Yeah, but you can get a far more repair bill while you're waiting than the interest, so that's the concern.
And the next page with the 4-year recap, Supervisor Federal, this will speak to your point a little bit. The reserve fund balance column, that 180,000 includes encumbrances. So you can see there was 180,000 in 22 and 489 in 23. About 150, that 180 would be encumbrances versus the 459. So you asked how much of the 1.1 was encumbrances, it's about 150,000. And again, the total fund equity looks like a decent number until you look at the unreserved fund balance. That $55,000 is not the end of the world because as soon as the fund breaks even, it's not a fund that you need a ton of fund balance in because it is self-funding. So break even is okay on a revenue fund, but it is a little bit lower than we're traditionally used to having in the fund. Remember, fund balance for me is cash flow. Because if you give, $500,000 of equipment purchases in Deb's budget, she in theory could pull the trigger in January. Right, so I've got to be able to have cash on hand to cover those purchases, should they actually be available on a lot somewhere and come in. That's really the purpose of fund balance. It's not really a rainy day fund, it's more a cash flow fund. Any questions on carpool? And I shared the breakdown of the personal services and.
Back to the committee.
Yes,
Public Works. Probably need to tee that up next month, when we're starting the conversation.
definitely for July budget season.
Yeah, well, to get the idea moving, we probably need to get it moving. And get to the point where we can put it on the table prior to
Get that.
to when you need it for the budget.
Like I said, we'll make every effort to sit down with the superintendent first, just to make sure that. I don't want to speak for her department anyway, but we definitely want to show
Yeah,
her
because
options.
she's totally opposed to certain parts of it, those have to be ironed out before it comes to the committee.
And if she is opposed, we just gotta understand why.
Yep.
There might be something we're not seeing.
I'm sure she'll be shy and afraid to tell you.
Exactly.
County Road Fund. So County Road Fund actually did very well this year. We finished with a fund equity at $1.8 million. And what's nice is not only did we not use the fund balance that was budgeted to be used, but she came in under budget on her pavement programs and she came in under budget on her bridge programs. So that's great for two reasons. One, it preserves fund balance that we can use going forward, because again, we're gonna be coughing up, 5% of the Marshall projects, and I would much rather do 5 than 100, but we still have a 5% share of those bridge projects. The secondary, maybe most important thing that you'll probably hear about at the next Public Works meeting, she has $1,079,000 in CHIPS rollover money. So in addition to what's in her budget this year, she in theory has the ability to use another $1 million. Should there be time and project, there's always projects, right? So it's a matter of time. How much can you get done before the weather shifts on you? So
Sometimes it's like doing a whole road instead of a portion of it and, it breaking up where it needs to instead of.
That's the DPW committee discussion, but we're having so many little bridge issues, chip money also be put towards the bridge projects, so maybe rather than extra paving with the carryover, we had to catch up on some of the bridges. We're running out of temporary bridges.
and I think that would be a healthy conversation when she comes to Public Works. I trust her on telling us what her priorities are, but I think that you're not wrong at all, based on what I've heard in committee. I definitely think we have some bridge needs that have been long unaddressed. Sam?
So this indicates that every project she had for the paving got done, she didn't have anything left over that needs to be done.
She would have to speak to that.
Well,
I
it's
didn't
more
know
than
that you were-
likely ran out of time. I think they did get most everything done, but sometimes you run out of time. I don't know.
So, that's fine, I understand. So I guess what I'm saying is that this money was in there, it could have been used had we had time to use it.
That's
That's
possible.
possibly why.
It is possible.
So it's not a gross over budget presentation.
No,
It's
no,
just
sir.
ran out of time, okay.
And she did very well managing her projects, because if I remember right, our asphalt prices actually ticked up a little bit. After the budget was given to her, so I think she really managed very well, getting done what she could with what she had. And again, she made a great decision, I think 2 years ago now. We do all of our own hauling. And what's nice about that is that equipment rental that we were paying to an outside firm before, we're now paying to ourselves. So it still shows as an expense in our county road fund, but our county road machinery fund gets that revenue to help offset the replacement costs of those vehicles going forward. So that turned out to be a great decision.
And last year, remember the rain slowed a lot of things down. We almost didn't get the roads painted.
That's what I was just gonna say.
So there was a lot of issues.
Plays a huge part on, what's projected being able to get done.
And she did, thanks to a mild winter, we also were $332,000 under budget on our county snow budget as well. So, every time we get a mild winter, we get a little slice to heaven there too, right? So I think
Benefit you get with blacktop.
anecdotally, I think that there was a lot more ice events this year than there were snow events. We still spent $1.7 million, but it's still, $300,000 under what we planned to spend. So at the end of the day, it's not bad at all. And if you look at the next page with a 4-year recap, you see that her unreserved fund balance went from 490,000 to 1.3 million. That's fantastic, because it really gives you some room to make decisions for 2025 that you couldn't normally make. That $1.3 million that we plan to use, we didn't use. So that's a huge win for us in the out years.
Correct, and that's why I would just simply make the statement, we want to be cautious about bold shifts in the budget on some numbers like that are early on and give the department an opportunity to
weigh in on.
smooth these things out and maybe plan something a little bit differently rather than hand them out.
Thanks. And then of course, the expenses by category, share with you again. You can see the debt service for county road in here. And I know that Brian and I have had several conversations about, we don't like the fact that we borrowed for roads and bridges, and we hope to not have to do that again, but right now, it is what it is, and this particular borrowing, we did at the time that we're going through the event in Port Edward, and we just couldn't cash flows, because as you know, with Marshall projects, we have to pay the bills and then we put in for reimbursement. So the ban that we have out on the roads and bridges was strictly for cash flow. And I continue to pay that down as much as I can every year based on the money that's come back in from Marshall County. So. Any questions on County Road?
You gotta believe though, with the amount of fund balance
We
being
should be,
put back, this should not happen again.
shouldn't,
Right, immediately.
and that
It will
goes,
happen again over years, but it shouldn't happen immediately.
and that goes to Supervisor Wilson's
Yes.
point that let's not go to Bermuda twice because.
When's the
3 times.
payoff for that? That's it. How long we got to go on?
So I can renew one more time, I think, Chair. It's a ban. so we
Right.
get-
But do you have to renew the highway portion? I guess that's. the question.
If I have enough cash, I'll just retire.
Yeah,
Right, that's what I'm trying to say.
I think that's what you're trying to get.
So it's next year we can retire.
So March of 2025, if I'm still in a good cash position, we'll just retire that one and be done.
That's what I was.
Yes.
Take a deep breath for 2025. Set conditions to do that.
And again, all of the capital money that we've got invested out there is right now earning 5.12% on the monies that we're holding. So, fingers crossed that maintains for a little while longer.
Yep.
So County Road Machinery. This is one of the ones that we definitely will have. So there's a couple of funds there's 3 funds that I want you to pay specific attention to this year or next year. This is one of them. Brian is aware, because this is like the second year in a row we've talked about it. County Road Machinery it's functioning, but when you get to the 4-year recap, you're gonna see how low our unreserved fund balance is. So this fund, even though Deb has adjusted the equipment rental rates, it's still not keeping pace with the needs of the fund. Now, what I don't remember and I didn't have time to dive into is where we have short sheeted ourselves in the past. The equipment rentals are supposed to be able to replace the equipment that was rented with that money. What we have done, the capital C County have done in the past is we have bought new items with replacement money. Right? We've made that mistake a few times. So that really throws the fund sideways when you're using replacement money to buy a new piece of equipment that you didn't have before. That's why this year you did make a decision, and I thank you for that. There was a new piece of equipment asked for, and we transferred money from general fund to do that. Right? That's how that's supposed to work. So thank you for that. But we will be looking at this fund at budget time very, very closely to see if there are other ways to do it, and if there are other things that we need to do to make it stronger. I gave you the list of vehicles that were purchased in 23, and then you can see the encumbrances for 2024 are over $2 million. And that's the reason that that's important is because when you look at their fund equity, it's, it looks like they're healthy. And hey, Vincent.
Like it in print.
You don't see the 4-year recap of County Road Machinery because it's missing.
I had it
I will-
yesterday.
It was there yesterday.
Probably.
When you get the packet,
It was actually
when you
decent.
get the packet with your minutes, I'll make sure that page is there. But they were down to $29,000 in unreserved, unappropriated fund balance. That's extremely low number.
But that's with those trucks encumbered,
And that's
right?
like over $2 million of.
Encumbered trucks, so.
There's $2.6 million of encumbered trucks. So the fund equity looks like you have $2.7 million. Hey, good times, right? No,
Yeah.
you have $29,000. Their question shows what it shows.
Yes, I hate to go back to,
You're fine.
page. On county road expense by type,
Yes, sir.
the cost of the labor basically is the total of personal services, fringe, 4.9, almost 5 million. Equipment, what is the equipment? Is that when where you're paying for machinery rental, does that go down? as
So
the-
most of the equipment cost in the highway fund
Yes,
is the road projects. So the way that the
so that's
comptroller,
basically the paving,
yes, sir.
and that would include bridges also?
Nope.
Okay.
Yes. Part of the bridge, but all of the roads are required, so all of the CHIPS expenses are required to be reported as a 0.2.
Okay.
So that $4 million in county road, of the majority of that is your road projects. There's like 3.5 million in Marshall 8, I think.
Okay, so that's not showing everything else. I got it. Then what is contractual?
That's your 0.4s. That's like your outside services and
Engineers,
don't-
bridge builders.
things that don't reach the 0.2 levels. A lot of like your, a lot of the supplies that they buy aren't fixed assets and are a 0.4.
Okay, so. Wow, that's a big number, 4 billion for the,
Would be all your steel, right? Wouldn't that be your steel, your culverts and all that too?
I would have to check to see what's going through
Salt.
there, but
So I think that
So-
everything,
salt is a big part of the
it's a
0.4.
commodity, so, but it's still, it comes under that.
yeah, well, I figured salt would be in
Yeah.
that. That's, but that doesn't include the bridges and other, maybe material for building the bridges.
Which is a big share, because we build a lot of them ourselves,
Well, I know.
so that's why it's so big, I believe.
Okay, thank you. I didn't want to go back for it, but I had to.
It does stun you how it all adds up to $10 million.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, but back to the road machinery, and I know we had this conversation, the biggest concern, I think, maybe, at least I'm having, but Dan, I know, has expressed this. We're trying to really, and I know Deb's working on this, make sure we don't have a bubble. Because you've got that 2 million in there now, and what's that look like over time? So that's the only thing, I'm gonna kind of ask her about that.
And just so you know, 1.2 of the 2 million was paid in March, so half of that's out the door already. The other thing that Brian and I will work with Deb on, because I don't have a way to diagnose it right now. Her county road revenues were only $30,000 off, but her interdepartmental revenues were $200,000 off. So we really want to delve into why that is. Right, so with county road being $400,000 under budget, and only $30,000 off from equipment rentals, that's a win. However, the other department side, which is a bulk of that, we just determined with buildings and grounds, that number was off considerably. So we want to make sure that I haven't taken and like moved a truck that was in buildings and grounds paying road machinery in the past, and now I have it in carpool, because carpool did better. So I want to make sure that we haven't just taken a piece of equipment. And I said, well, wait a minute, the pickup truck for buildings and grounds is really a fleet car. So it could be just an accounting change. It could be that simple an answer. But we definitely want to follow up on why that delta exists in the road machinery.
And the road machinery fund would be higher if you'd used that other $1 million of CHIPS money.
Yes,
You would have built more, so. It's all relative, but you do A and B and C happen and sometimes D, so.
so there
A
are
lot more.
conversations between now and July that will be important.
Sure.
The next 2 pages, and I won't spend a lot of time on them, because I won't really have a lot to add to the conversation. Kevin can definitely jump in if he chooses to, but this shows the 4 years for sewer 1 and the 4 years for sewer 2. It gives their financial position. And again, you need to know this information when you're, working with Kevin on his needs going forward. But as far as like the fund overviews and stuff, that's more something that Kevin's better equipped to share with you at the Public Works Committee than today. I can answer any questions that you may have on sewer district, and Kevin's here, should you have something that I can't wrap my head around. But I definitely want you to have at least the financial picture, and more importantly, that Kevin has the financial picture. Because when he comes and he gets hit with, $50,000 or $100,000 worth of attorney bills, and he's got to figure out where to pay for them, he's got to know, if I'm going to appropriate fund balance, I got to know what my fund balance is. So these numbers are important to Kevin as they are to you, I think. Is there any questions on sewer district?
Well, only in that are we uncomfortable or comfortable with the unreserved fund balance numbers for both one and two? Are those?
So I don't like the fact that it's ticking down, Supervisor, but some of that is truly nothing that you can help. I noticed that even though they've done some considerable rate increases over the past 5 years, it appears that the water usage is down. Is that correct, Kevin, based on what?
And I would say with the fund balance, it typically is growing every year. We had a disaster on the bridge
Which-
last year, right?
with a huge-
It was somewhere $700,000 to $1 million out of that. And, one single hit, so
Yep.
it is growing. It's just, you don't see it looking at year to year because it's through in the middle and then chop it half.
Right. And the reserve fund balance, you saw got to tick back up this year, which was good news. And there's actually a little bit more money, should the Board of Commissioners decide to decommission the FE1A project. There is money out in that project that would be returned to sewer districts to be able to be used for another purpose. So, should they decide to close that FE1A project, they may have a better use for that money in another project. So I'm sure you'll hear more about that in the very near future.
Kevin, on the assets, I guess my question is, because it looks like they're, trending down a little bit. But with a major overhaul down there, I'm just, in my mind, think our assets should be higher. Am I wrong on that, or is that just not hit the paper yet?
And most of the new equipment or assets is going in this year.
Okay, so that hasn't hit the books yet.
So none of those assets are assets.
Okay,
Right.
I don't know when,
so that was my question.
It's almost all cash.
Okay, this is just cash assets.
These aren't physical assets.
That's what, that's.
So, and the only reason that the assets appear to be down on the, there is a money from general fund that was transferred across years. So there's like a $500,000 swing across.
Okay.
So that it's actually
That's
not as
explains, right? It's
drastic.
assets as in cash, not
It's
in
asset-
inventory.
Not, yeah, with, all of the assets on these sheets are not physical assets. They're receivables, cash equivalents, that those inventory. Inventory is the only physical asset, if that helps.
Yeah, and that's, well, I just know that with all we've done down there, I'm thinking there's no way it's that low.
So we do have a fixed assets fund that is in
Yes.
here, but it's reported to the comptroller, and that's where those things are measured. Any questions on sewer district that I can answer?
I've got a question, I don't know whether it even should be asked, but
However,
whose responsibility is this, these financials for the sewer district?
mine,
Pardon me?
mine.
So you then are the county? In other words, if this is bad management, it's our fault? If this is good management, it's our credit? I mean, because you got the commissioners always confused as me. At one time, see, I remember back when 2000, when we didn't even lay claim to it. It was an oversight committee, and now it's almost like it's our sewer district, is it?
It always was.
Yeah,
Well,
that's why it's called oversight.
nah, it never was. I don't agree with you, but that's not the issue. The issue here is if this in any way, there's a failure down there financially, is the county responsible for it?
Yes.
Then why do we listen to or do anything with the commissioners? If it's all on our shoulders.
Look at it the other way. It's just like our department heads. We're
Well,
all
look
one,
at-
we're all one team. We all have to work together for anything here to succeed. And if we just fight with each other and don't work together, nothing will succeed. So the sewer district just happens to be two regular towns that are basically included in the sewer district. They can only be allowed through, under the county umbrella is the only reason it's allowed to be had. So it still comes under our umbrella totally. It's not a lot different than Pleasant Valley used to work. Tammy was, because it was Tammy who was the commissioner of social services, she was actually the head of Pleasant Valley on all the Medicaid money and stuff that went through there. she couldn't control any of that. It was controlled down there. But she played the role like the treasurer does here for the sewer district. She played that role for Pleasant Valley. So it's all related. It's all a team effort, and you're supposed to look at every category as if you own it, because you do.
I see two different pieces, Supervisor. What I heard, the question you asked was the financials. I'm responsible for the financials. Operations is a different conversation. And we need to trust the Board of Commissioners who are supposed to specialize in that operation. So to me, there's a difference between operations. You asked a question about the financials. The financials are my responsibility. The operations
I see what.
are not. So I guess I designate two different paths in regards to the sewer district. We're responsible for the carrying, feeding of their payroll and financials. Right? The Board of Commissioners is responsible for the carrying, feeding of their operation. We then need to trust that board on the operation of the facility. I don't know if that answers your question, but it maybe is.
Well, I see what you're saying. I've always looked at, it's Kevin's responsibility. And we have to trust Kevin, which I trust Kevin. So, and I don't know I've seen the time we've got ahead of the commissioners and approved something and, maybe stepped on some toes, and now we try to wait to hear what the commissioners have to say. But it's almost like a protocol to hear what the commissioners have to say. We get right into the weeds again right here and micromanage it with Kevin. And that's why I'm trying to sort this out in my mind. Ultimately, it's ours.
And I don't envy
That's what
Kevin,
you're saying.
I don't envy Kevin having to serve two masters either, so.
Well, no, but I'm trying to understand it is all. That's all.
I will say, I wasn't around 30 years ago, whatever, but I did see a resolution. The commissioners were created by the county as oversight committee. It initially was the county created the Board of Commissioners as an oversight committee to, like I said, oversee the operations. So for them to come back to this committee for financials or execution of things of that nature.
It's the only way they can borrow.
Do you have an elected highway official?
Yes,
Are you in charge of this financial?
yeah.
Yeah. Who's in charge of the operation highway department?
Well. That's an interesting shit.
Same way.
Whole different stuff.
No, it's all relative.
It's not the same.
We let Mike come out.
But
He runs us highway department, but.
you're absolutely right. That's where I was going with our department heads. It's all relative. We control the fiscal part, but we have to trust the department to run it the way but they do bring things to us because we're like the Board of Commissioners also in each department. It's like a dual role then.
Now, a few years ago, one of our supervisors made a motion to terminate a sewer district director. Did he actually have the authority to do that? Do we have the authority to do that?
Yes,
Yes, we do.
you are the appointing
It was a
authority.
little different than elected. But
Right.
That's why I like this chart, because, and I asked the question about the balance of the chart, right? So are the percentages about right? Are they where we want to be based on what you are looking at for your operations this year and three to 4 years down the road?
And I can't speak for Kevin, but I assume the things that keep him up at night aren't today's numbers. They're looking 5 and 10 years out.
Exactly.
Because he has some huge, and I mean,
Right.
huge projects coming up that we're gonna have some serious conversations about, because there's gonna be some debt service attached that is on the backs of the ratepayers, right? So,
Right, and specific to this, fund balance, yes, I am comfortable because it's growing on average, I think, $300,000 or $400,000 per year, and you just don't see it from 21.
One disaster.
Because we took such a huge hit at once for a disaster that once every 50-year disaster.
just like when you had the big explosion from Cumberland Farms, there's some odd events that can throw you really sideways from your normal operation, right? So the 197 bridge was a similar type of event.
But that's why you invested in the camera, right? So you can get out there and try to get ahead of that stuff. So, yeah, you've been expensing some stuff that Yeah, so that's going into next year. That's where my thoughts are is, do we need to make some adjustments to help this look better?
But basically, our treasurer is our chief fiscal officer. That was just pretty good.
We-
So that's why he's in charge of all the financials that come under the county umbrella.
Right, but we gotta get back to the commission, we gotta get back to Dan's point, we get back to the commissioners and say, or give them some guidance on where to make this a little better, if we need to make it better. That's the only thing I'm thinking of.
Well, it should go both ways. They should be giving us guidance so we make the right decisions.
Well, it's a conversation, right? It's a back and forth with the commissioners about, what that balance sheet looks like.
And it seems like every time we take a step forward, we get a step backwards because they put the rates to where they think they should be, and then usage goes down, so they didn't gain anything. And there's no way to predict what the usage is gonna be. So, they're always looking at, adding, do we want to expand the district? Do we want to contract the district? How do we want to look at building different? So they are looking at ways to try to make it, again, I don't think it's day numbers that are hurting him. I think it's when he looks at the future, what do I have to do to make sure 50 years from now, we still have a sewer district? Or, we have a sewer commission and we're out of the business.
Well, and we see the big swings from what it used to be to what it is now, but we also see the big pitfalls of what we thought was okay in the past. It wasn't. That's finally getting corrected. But when you get down to it, it's still $1 a day per household. How bad is that? I mean, you gotta put it in perspective.
One of the big things to remember, and Kevin is gonna get this in education real soon, what the district levies on the taxes for its capital goes against the county's cap.
I pay that.
That's just something that we have to keep in mind, and we're gonna be meeting with Kevin soon about his debt service. Because as his debt service grows, if there's an impact on the county's 2% cap, so we wanna walk him through how that works, and so you'll all see more of that as we move forward too. Any other questions on sewer district?
But we have to work together.
Yes, sir. So the biggest concern in this whole packet is honestly the next fund. So our health insurance fund, any of you that are involved with health insurance, even at the town level, you know that this is a market that's just gone crazy. And unfortunately, we had one of the worst years claim wise that we've had in a long time. So, we've seen some of that slow down, thankfully. A lot of the high cost claimants that were in the pipeline in 2023 are now out of the pipeline, thankfully, because that means they're doing better, right? So we have high hopes that 2024 is going to level out. For all intents and purposes, the claims over the past 2 months have leveled out from the levels that we were seeing. We were seeing $280,000 and $300,000 a week claims coming across my desk, and that's just crazy.
But if I could add there,
Yes.
it's not only, we've had some very odd, I guess, for lack of a better word, claims because of the severity of the claims, but unfortunately, it's the cost of the claims, and I don't see those going down. So it's the expenses
So
that are passed
That's a
on.
good point. It's not that we have more claims, it's the claims are costing.
The same actual procedures cost half to double.
Right.
And the same with drugs are half to double. So that's where we're seeing the big increase.
And the biggest note that I want to make sure that we all wrap our head around, because you're going to have probably several conversations with Brian going forward about this fund. Because right now, the fund is, for all intents and purposes, it is in trouble. And this isn't the sky is falling, but it's a caution, right? Our fund balance is down to 1.3 million. We should never be below 3 million, honest to God, in a fund like this, right? So last year you infused $1 million into this fund, and thank you for that, because if you hadn't, we'd be having a very different conversation today. You saw during an open enrollment that we had a 15% increase, which was a planned increase in the 2023 budget, because our plan year starts in June. Unfortunately, looking at the numbers, unless there's some kind of drastic leveling out, you're going to be hit with that same number again in 25. Right? We were looking at a 34%. The need of the fund was about 34%. We funded 15. So we're not there yet. And even when you get there, if there isn't some kind of cost containment, you're gonna have to get there again. And that's a cost to both the employees and to the county, right? Because we split those costs 75-25 with the employees. So you get to the point where, that 2% raise was eaten up entirely by the increased cost of their health insurance. And now you run into, recruitment and retention problems because now they went backwards in their pay because, they couldn't afford their health insurance. So there will be some conversations going forward about what to do with this fund. One of them we may be having today because I may be looking for another infusion if that's something that you're gonna entertain, but we'll talk about that later in the agenda. But I just want you to know that, 1.3 million is really, that's really a yellow line fund balance for me. I wouldn't want to see that drop any lower.
So, I think you mentioned this, but I want to reiterate it. The statement rates for 2024 will be raised 15% out of a possible need of 33%.
Yes, sir.
So we know we're in effect not raising it enough to cover what we think the expense will be.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're trying to be reasonable but cautious at the same time. We know there's fund balance there to cover it, to get us through, but we have to stay regimented to keep adding that on. Plus, we have to abide by our contract. If we just keep infusing cash and don't raise the rates, there's no way they're 25%, so.
Yeah, Mr. Cable had an interesting point that I hadn't thought of when I talked to him about this. When you infused $1 million into the fund, that kind of skews that 75-25, right? Because at that point, it wasn't 75% county. But you paid $1 million over your required 75%. So that was an interesting way to look at it that I hadn't really thought about, but, again, I might be asking you to do that again, so. But again, it's not about the number today. It's my job to help you make sure that this fund is sustainable in the out years. And we can't continue to put 15% every year. So we have to get to a point where the fund is functioning at a self-sustaining level, right?
So the 15% might be, it might be every year, we don't know that.
But we can't control what happens in the market either. I mean, when you, all of you deal with health insurance, I'm sure at the town level too, and this, and our retirees, they had to switch programs this year because Albany now owns Glens Falls, no longer accepts Humana. So there's just some market things that we have absolutely no control over, right? So stay tuned for more concerned about the health insurance fund, but that is really, if there is one problem child in this packet, this would be the one that I would draw your attention to, because there's going to be a fiscal need here that there's no easy and non-painful way to solve. Self-insurance fund. Again, this fund, I think, is finally leveling out. We're gonna be talking in a few minutes about a new way to build this, because the only way that this fund won't be in trouble is if we stop appropriating fund balance to balance the budget. So again, this fund is meant to be self-sustaining, like the carpool, like the road machinery. So what this fund is supposed to do is whatever your expenses are this year, you should have the same amount of revenues coming in. There should be no fund balance use. And for this fund to survive, you can't continue to use fund balance. So the 498,000 that's in there now, again, that fund balance we use for cash flow. So it's not necessarily a rainy day fund. We need that money because we have bills come out of workers' comp every 2 weeks. So, and remember that the workers' comp fund is made up of the county, EMS, fire, all the towns and all the villages. So it's a pool that we all belong to, and it's a pool that we all contribute to. We are going to be talking today about a possible local law change the way that this is built. What we're doing currently is not working. What the current local law says, and we're going to discuss this in a few minutes. The current local law says for next year's budget, we're going to look at what the actual claims were 2 years ago. So it's a 2-year look back for next year's budget. And if claims are going down every year, that would work just fine. it's not working because claims aren't going down.
Yeah, the volatility is so high right now that.
So again, even if you have the same amount of claims, the claims are costing more. So to fund 2024 with 2022 money will continue to be broken and you'll continue to need fund balance to make that work. So we're gonna talk about a possible new rate change in workers' comp and insurance.
Yeah, what should that number be?
What number?
The 498,
I'm okay where it is. I just don't want to see it any lower.
so 500,000 is
Half a
okay.
million is a
It's
decent,
it's the fact that it's falling is what's bothering me.
yes, sir.
So, but the 500,000 is safe.
Yes, sir.
Fund, do your funding.
Yep.
On a monthly basis.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then one of the things that I appreciate when Mr. Campbell and I started working together is I really wanted to encourage the county to look at, so we spend a lot of time looking at revenues and we spend a lot of time looking at expenses, but we really never put the two together because really the impact on the taxpayers and the impact on fund balance is really net cost. Because if your expenses go up by $1 million, but your revenues went up by 1.2, your net cost of operation actually went down. We never really looked at our budget that way. So we do now look at that. So it's part of the conversation now. If expenses go up, we also try to make sure that you know if there's any offsetting revenues so that when you haven't, so if social services has a new hire and the cost of that new hire is $80,000 with fringe, but 75% of that is paid by the feds, right? We want you to know that the actual local impact is 25% of that 80,000, right? So those conversations I think are important in your decision-making. So the last 2 pages here shows all of the funds that are in the package, what the total revenues were and what the total expenses were, to give you what the net cost of that operation actually was. And you'll see that carpool, county road, and sewer 2 actually all enjoyed surpluses in 2023. And my footnote to that is the one that I gave you at the beginning of the meeting. That $2.3 million cost in general fund is actually a $3 million surplus. If you back out the $5.7 million that was the 2022 sweep done in 2022 sweep done in 2023. So if you take that sweep out of the expenses, you actually have a surplus in general fund, almost completely attributable to the sales tax growth. Any questions? And again, you're welcome to see me anytime. If you want more numbers, if you're comfortable with this presentation, I think this makes more sense. If you want more or less, this is fine. Again, it saves you from having to come back another day this month, just to hear this all over again. And the decisions we're gonna ask you to make for the rest of the morning, you can make with a basis in reality.
So next is gonna be the stop loss sheet.
So next. So this sheet. Thank you. This sheet's next. Just stop loss. So Benetech came to us this year because we buy stop loss insurance. And what that does is if one of our high cost claimants hits a trigger point, the insurance kicks in and we're not responsible for claims over that value. Okay? Highmark, the renewal for that insurance came in significantly increased. You see, it went from $477,000 to $632,000. So that caused us to pause and say, are there other people that offer the insurance? So Benetech shopped that for us. They did find, I think there was 3 other options. The one that we're bringing you today is Symetra. Their cost is actually $492,000 at the $250,000 level, which is what you have now. And it's $439,000 at the $275,000 level. And this program actually comes with a refund. So there's actually a refund back to the county of part of that premium should you not use the insurance. Okay, the other thing that's important to know, and maybe only selfishly for me, Symetra, so Highmark stop loss insurance. If somebody triggered the stop loss, I would get a credit back on the bill. With Symetra, I have to pay the bill and they'll send me a check for whatever the overage was. Again, not a big deal. It's like a 7-day turnaround. So it's a cash flow thing, but it's only like a week. So that was the biggest significant difference, but it was a huge, huge premium savings. So as you can see, it's $140,000 savings over Highmark at the 250. It's $192,000 savings over Highmark at the 275. So the two things that I need from the board today is number one, to approve the chairman to sign a contract with Symetra. That would be my recommendation. But the bigger conversation with the board is going to be, do you want to entertain moving the stop loss from 250 to 275? So this year we had one person, so this was the worst year that I've seen since I've been treasurer. We had one person hit stop loss. So we paid $477,000 to save, I think it was like 54,000 last time we looked at it. So again, insurance is your sleep at night, though. You pay insurance hoping that you never need it, right? So that's the, but for me, if I paid 150 to save 50, could I have done better? That's the question I have to ask. So what I wanted to run by the board this morning is, do you have any appetite in moving from the 250,000 to the 275,000 to save $52,000 in premium? So basically you would need to have 2 additional people hit stop loss to break even on the savings and premium. That make sense?
Procedural, we need a resolution for both.
I think they can probably be together.
So it would be in the same resolution. Okay, and the going from 250 to 275 doesn't have to be in the resolution, but I would love it to be. The chairman to sign is the biggest piece of the resolution, Chairman Humphrey.
Yeah, we know, I know it's recommended to us, but you know anything under Symetra insurance? About the company itself or stability?
Benetrek has experience with them, and we pay Benetrek to be our administrator, so we trust in their experience in the market.
I think to follow up on Sam's, we don't want to get in a position like with Humana and the out-of-network providers.
So this is simply insurance on stop loss. Has nothing to do with claims.
Right.
If somebody has $250,000 in claims, their insurance kicks in.
I think it's important to mention also, we've had extensive conversations with Benetech about the stop loss. And that this is also their recommendation, and they think that we're in the good spot, and this makes sense to go that 275 at this point.
I mean, based on our exposure, because that's my biggest question was, what's our exposure? And you now articulated it.
And I think the other thing is somebody that would have been 250,000 2 years ago is now 275 just from the change in the medical cost.
Yeah, that was the point I was gonna make it. 275 is 50.
It might be the new 250, right, as a cost.
And if it keeps escalating, there could be a lot over the 270.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Second as well.
What do we move?
Move into, authorize the chairman to sign
At,
at 275.
Move by Dan Shaw, second by Sam. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. The next is the workers' comp.
so wait, there's more.
So it's 64 on sheet.
This sheet's next. This is the one that's got the 60, 20, 20 across the top.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that's up for this. First count.
So I wanted to start the conversation, and please Melissa jump in if you need to, or I step out of line here, but I wanted to start the conversation with reminding everybody how we currently do. So currently, we take claims from 2 years ago, allocate those, Then we have pooled claims, so we have the county responsible for fire, EMS, and all the PV legacy. We also have no more than $20,000 in claims, your claims, in your contribution can no more than double. We have like 5 pages of how the math in this fund works. And whenever we try to have this conversation, people's eyes just glaze over, because it's like, there's like 15 if-then statements in the local law, right? That's an exaggeration, but it's very complex. And the poor employee in Melissa's office that keeps 15 different spreadsheets trying to track all this stuff. It's really, Washington County making easy things difficult since 1784 is our motto. We really have convoluted how this fund is done. And what I'm proposing, and I've met with Melissa and Brian and the employee in Melissa's office to look at maybe a new way to do this. And I don't want to oversimplify it, but it almost kind of is. What I'm proposing is a new local law, that the math is simply this. Rather than funding next year's budget with 2 years ago expenses, which is never gonna be the same number, we fund it more on a needs basis. So if we know what the 25 budget is, which we pretty much do by July, we have a handle on what our claims are going to be. We know what the safety officers are gonna cost us. We have a really good renewal quote from the insurance company. So we kind of know basically what the claims are gonna be and what the cost of that fund are gonna be. We do that measurement every year. We do that now. We measure what we think next year's needs are gonna be for that fund. What we do though, is we then say, okay, we need $1.6 million next year. But the claims are only 1.4 last year, so we're gonna use $200,000 of fund balance to bridge that gap. That's what we need to stop doing. So the proposal now takes next year's needs of $1.6 million. Takes away from that any of the rebates that we get in, because we kind of know what they are too. They're pretty consistent. And then it says, okay, out of the 1.6, we need 1.4. So we're gonna now spread that $1.4 million. Forget about what you spent 2 years ago. We know we need $1.4 million. So how do you allocate that $1.4 million? The proposal that's in front of you is 60% based on payrolls, 20% based on assessed valuation, and 20% based on what your actual claims were in the immediate year preceding. So our measurement for 25 would be the claims that just finished 12/31/23. But that only represents 20% of your allocation. What's nice about that is, in my opinion, and I think Brian agrees, by only basing 20% on the actual claims, if you're a town or a village that unfortunately has some significant claims, you're not gonna have a spike in year 1, and then a drop in years 2 and 3, and then a spike again in year 6. This is gonna it'll smooth out even when you have a bad year, because only 20% of your allocations will be based on how bad that year was. So 80% of your allocation is gonna be based on your payroll and your assessed valuation. I think it's 90-10 now. Is how we figure part of your allocation, and then we add your actual claims on top of it. So this is definitely easier math, right? So you kind of know your assessed valuation, you definitely know your payroll, and we can share with you what your claims are. And this sheet shows you the numbers that we know today. Now, you'll notice that there is an increase, but you'll also notice that the increase that we're asking for is darn near close to the amount of fund balance that we used. So what this does is this gives us the actual revenues that we need to run the fund without using any fund balance. And again, what's nice is if claims are down, which by investing in the safety officers in their programs, the goal is to get claims down. Some things you can't avoid, right? But if claims are down, then you can do better. And then your fund balance can grow a little bit. And if fund balance grows, we can have different conversations. But I think that this way, you're gonna take out peaks and valleys, and you're gonna see a smoothing across the year. So in year one, which is 2025, you're all gonna see a bit of a jump from this year. And that's reflected on this sheet. But then in 2026, you should see a fairly smooth rate. From 25 to 26, you should have very little growth, is the prediction, barring any huge expenses in the fund that we don't foresee coming. So that's a very simplistic way to explain it, but it really is that simple. We're taking a very convoluted formula and making it very simple 60-20-20 that everybody can wrap their head around. I know that when we've had this conversation in the past, we lose some supervisors halfway through because it's just a lot. And this is something I think everybody can understand. The other thing to remember too is for the county and the towns, your workers' comp allocation is actually comes out on your tax bill. The only ones that pay direct are the villages. They actually cut us a check in July. For the towns and the county, that's all part of your town and county bill. So whatever your increase is actually spread across everyone in your town.
In the county, and town goes against the county cap.
Right, and it goes against the county's cap, so whatever that increase is, we're gonna eat on our cap on the levy, so. When you think about it in total, if we go up $200,000 on workers' comp, we've gotta go down $200,000 on the levy, so. In a perfect world, the impact on the taxpayer is net zero, right? Because we will have to go down the same amount that we went up. Just stay within the 2%.
Questions on that?
Mr. Shaw.
I apologize, it's probably clear what you said, but with all these numbers, information you give me these days, it's a little foggy, but here's I don't understand, you said that the actual claims, which you're gonna base it on 20%?
Yes, sir.
That way, by only using 20%, it cushions the impact of a big hit on a particular town or village.
It should smooth you out over several years, yes.
Well, but do you end up, eventually that town or village pays their share, or are the other towns in the county picking up that cushion?
So the former county attorney had a saying that I love, and it's sometimes you eat the bear and sometimes the bear eats you.
So in other words, if one town has a catastrophic, we're all gonna pay a little for it.
But you're right, you eventually pay it yourself.
That's what I was wondering. Eventually, I don't care if
Eventually,
you
you
carry
always
it.
pay yourself.
I got no problem with that, but it does eventually, the town covers the total loss, like we're doing now.
But it will take the spike out of it.
Right,
The
just the
biggest,
spike.
the biggest difference that I see is our basis is higher on the bottom. So you're never gonna get lower than you used to be before, but it should keep us from taking fund balance to correct it every time we're behind.
Yeah.
In the way it's set up right now, there's no way you can't always be behind every year.
Thank
So
you.
we're trying to fix it this way. We'll let you know if it doesn't work. Or it don't.
Sure you will.
Yeah.
You'll know, trust me.
Good, bad, or indifferent.
But the adjustment point won't be next year, the adjustment point would be in 2 years or so, because,
So it'll actually be 25.
yeah.
It will be next year.
No, I'm sorry. If we adopt, making any adjustments would be premature, we have to let this thing roll a couple of years.
Oh, yes, your feedback on whether it works.
Yeah.
Would be 2 years out.
But because we always go for the year that you already have the information, it should work going forward. That's the idea. And so this is. If this local law that tried to, that we need to.
There would be, it's paid, it's where it says in there, gonna approve a local law be of Washington County.
Yes.
So you would have to, I imagine the committee would have to, Devin's, excuse me if I'm wrong, but the committee would move to set a public hearing for local law B. Right, that would be the process. If you're interested in changing the law to this new map.
So I need a motion to set the public hearing. For the local law at what meeting, Deb?
This one.
we set the public hearing at this meeting and then it would be the following one.
Be what on in June.
Moved by Sam, second by James. Any more discussion on that?
And I will say that I have thrown a lot at you this morning, so please feel free to come see me if you have questions or concerns.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried.
We get the federal, without the flat tax. You got this done.
You know, there was a lot to be said for that Ben Carson 999 plan.
Okay, so we're on to the budget amendment.
Sorry.
This gives enough time for the, you'll have numbers available for.
So the sheet in front of you is actually what is pretty darn close to what it would look like. We actually ran the numbers as we see them today, so. Cool. The sheet you get in June or July won't look much different than what's in front of you today. That's our best guess on what we know right now. Back to you, Trina.
Okay, so. I'll get a bunch of amendments. I'm trying to follow the agenda at the same time. And there's some in the order here. Well, we just passed B, so I want to go with C on the budget amendments of various departments.
And for those of you who haven't been here before, what we do this time every year after I close the books, because we don't budget in total, because we could budget 0.1, 0.2, 0.4, we don't do that. We budget every line independently. So because we do that, every year when I close the books, we have what we call a cleanup resolution. And what that does, it takes all these individual line items and just trues them up. So we don't go over in total, but we have to move money around between the several line items. And I told Melissa, we'll have a little conversation at the next department head meeting, because this resolution, as we look at it this year, is longer than normal. And I think some of this stuff we can do during the year so that it doesn't take a year. A lot of this money can be moved independently because we have a form that allows Brian to move money from a 4 to a 4 or a 2 to a 2 or a 1 to a 1. So some of this nickel and dime stuff can be done during the year and not have to make it to the floor. But that's a conversation for the next department head meeting.
The department heads are really good at it
They
usually.
do
but
really
they
well.
Get a little lax once in a while, some are better than others. So.
And then we get closer to year end, some of them know that I'm gonna do this resolution and let it ride, so. So,
I know you get a couple $1.
they're, they have to unfortunately be done.
Okay.
Motion.
Well, yeah, they're still looking, sorry.
I'll move it.
Okay,
I'll
resolution
second.
by
One.
Nancy, second by Daryl. Any discussion on this? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Okay, next is resolution D, is to increase the reserve of technology projects for rolling over $189,985.
I'll move it.
Moved by Daryl, second by James. Is there any discussion on that?
Yeah.
I'm doing this discussion for you.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Resolution E is the county road fund budget for equipment purchases.
Yep, that's the sign shop.
Sign job. Yep.
Move it.
Second.
Cassie moves it, Daryl second, so it's James. Any discussion on this? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. F is to amend the capital project 128 Marchicelli grant projects. Moved by James, second by Cassie. Any discussion?
The only thing that I want to note on this resolution, I won't move this money until I have to from County Road, because as you see here, what happens with Marshall is we always get the 80-20 split first, and a couple months down the road, the state Marshall finally chips in their 15%. So I hold on to this money as long as humanly possible, because our end of fortune should only be 5%. So to move 57,000 in, just to move some back, it would be an act of futility. So I do wait until I see if the state costs up their 50.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Resolution G is the sheriff from Marine Patrol Grant.
Move it.
Moved by Cassie, second.
Sam, myself.
Sam, second.
Same.
Any
I saw his
discussion?
hand
All
go up.
in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? H is sheriff for criminal, justice discovery reform grant. Moved by Sam, second by Cassie. Any discussion?
The only thing that I will let the committee know is Youth Bureau also got some of this money, but because it was for personal services, they're already budgeted. They don't need a budget amendment.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Resolution I is authorized chairman to sign contract amendments to Wright Pierce contract for County Third District number 1 rehab project.
So moved.
Moved by Darrell, second by Cassie. So, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Resolution J, urging the state of New York to enact rescue EMS package of legislation to strengthen emergency medical services. Moved by Sam, second by James. Any discussion on this? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. K is a resolution opposing Senate Bill 4545 and Assembly Bill 3069 that attempts to consolidate the 109 industrial development agencies into 10 regional industrial development agencies, urging the governor not to sign the legislation if passed. So I need a motion for resolution K. Moved by Sam, second by James. Any discussion?
Yes. So what does this actually mean in the way we operate now?
They were gonna take it away and make 10 regional districts and you didn't have local say is pretty much.
That's what I assumed it meant. I just wanted to clarify that. Sure.
Any more discussion?
No, I have. Stand by my position, all the idea, move, right around.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Yeah.
L, to
Yeah.
approve. Oh,
I just threw them off.
to approve it as illegal services, L Herring renewal.
Move it.
Motion by James, second by Cassie. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried.
Just so you know, it's level funding, but they consolidated all three programs into one.
Thank you. Resolution M, amend the staffing pattern title by grade to remove unused county clerk titles. Dr. Snivet, moved by Sam, second by Cassie. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. L, or N. Supplemental mortgage tax disbursements. Moved by Cassie, second by James, Sam. Any discussion on those? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Both mortgage tax. Do we have to do that separately? We should do separate. The mortgage tax warrant for the actual mortgage tax too. Moved by James, second by Sam. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Very good. That leads
We need to go back
to.
to the 4B.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna go back. I just had to get through the resolution.
Yes, I just want to make sure that,
Go ahead.
so I don't have them yet. They're being drafted, but you will also see, hopefully in the mail tomorrow morning with your packet. You're gonna see 2 borrowing resolutions for the sewer district as well. Their HF1A project is being increased from 5.5 million to 8 million. And there'll be a bonding resolution also, 15 million, 15.5 for the septic receiving capital project that Kevin talked about at Public Works. So again, these are just the authorizations to borrow. They're not a trigger to borrow. So you'll see those on the floor next Friday as well.
Are some of these under the 0% that you guys qualify for? They should be. Oh, okay. Just to clarify. The administrator, you're up.
So, I'm going to pass out the current voucher policy that the county has adopted.
We got enough on it? Anyone else need a call from the developer?
At the last government ops committee, I had brought forward the request to take a look at the voucher policy. I had some concern from a couple of our department heads, larger departments that have employees that do a lot of training outside of the county and have a lot of meal reimbursements. Biggest concern is from DSS and the sheriff's office. And the current policy on page, let me see, it's page 5. At the top, I did cross out, it says the county will not pay the sales tax. The voucher claiming sales tax will have the sales tax deducted and the total adjusted before payment. It's the next part that I crossed out that I'm looking to have changed. For meal reimbursements, please refer to the county handbook. Vouchers submitted for employee reimbursements, for example, meals, items purchased for the county business or mileage need to be submitted with the original receipt, the full details of items purchased and assigned voucher. So the current policy requires a department to submit each receipt for each meal that employee purchases to be reimbursed for that meal price. If you have an employee that, and this happens, has 3 weeks of training, they submit a receipt for each meal that they actually purchase in order to get reimbursed. So it becomes very cumbersome on the employee to actually keep the receipts for all these meals, on the department to make sure that they get all of the receipts. And then of course it gets submitted, go to his office, and then also through audit. So the current policy does seem to be quite cumbersome. The request is to take a look at the policy, see if the board has interest in not requiring the receipts to be submitted for the reimbursement amounts for the meals. That went to government ops and was approved and forwarded to finance because there was also a request to take a look at the current amounts that we are actually reimbursing the employees at for each meal. So I guess my first request is to see if there is interest in, sorry, yes.
Can we, Chairman, can we just reverse the order of this and work up the per diem thing first, because I think that may answer this portion of what she's trying to accomplish here.
That's where I was going.
Yeah. I think that we need to take a look at increasing our rate, number one, and just making it a flat rate per diem. So we aren't forcing people to go without meals or to eat meals at a certain time of day. Because of the cost side of it.
Here's the, so right now I'll hand out what is actually this is the amounts that are in the employee handbook. There are a couple union contracts which do mirror these rates as well, so that would be something we'll change later. I'm not looking to actually change the handbook right now. And not requesting that, but I want you to be able to see the current amounts for the meals, $7 for breakfast, $9 for lunch, and then $14 for dinner, the daily total of $30.
These haven't been adjusted in several years.
They haven't, yes, they haven't been adjusted in a very long time, as you know,
Is there any reason why we can't use per federal rate?
We could. It's just a matter of us deciding that that's what we want to do. I think we got.
Because we,
Except for the information flow and that changes.
Right. So it's far easier for you to change our own number.
Flow it around through the whole.
yeah, I didn't know if we had to formally or just say per federal rate.
I think formally it's better.
You might hear what that is.
Well, okay.
Because it can change all the time.
I can see. His heart monitor just went.
Yeah, I know we had to propose amounts here for each meal. I would like to make a motion that we just give them a flat rate of $60. Let them spend it on the way they want on their meals. Okay, some people can have irritable bowel syndrome, so you don't eat a big breakfast to start the day because you're going to be trying to run to the restroom all the time. They may decide to save the money they want to spend on a decent dinner, because of theirs. And so I don't think we should force them to eat a meal to get money.
No, it's whether they qualify to be away at that time. If they're away for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they qualify for all of it. If you're only away for 2 meals, you qualify for 2, and if you're
Which is
only,
fine.
so that's kind of where
So
we're going.
you gotta pick a number.
So that's why it's
So-
not a daily.
So it's the number we got, and the department head will decide whether you were away for breakfast and lunch, or you were away for lunch and dinner, or if you're away for just one of them.
So the responsibility
The
would put on that
responsibility is totally on the
department head
department.
and the employee, to submit for the proper reimbursement. And then instead of the process going through the audit committee, there would be a form, which with Sue's help, we've already created. And then that form would be signed by the employee testifying that that amount is correct. The department head is also signing that, and then that would go directly to the treasurer's office. And then the employee would be reimbursed via check. It would go into their normal paycheck.
And in the event that it was paid for by the state, if it's a state training, they wouldn't qualify for any of it.
But to Sam's point, if someone is qualified for breakfast, lunch and dinner, and for some reason they don't eat breakfast, can they still get up to the 60 or no?
Yes,
If they were
If you qualify for the,
Right.
yes,
Okay.
we don't care how they spend it.
Right.
So which, are you saying if we adopt the red line, then you have it all figured out, or we should be adopting it with the breakfast, lunch and dinner, because that adds up to the $60. Because if people aren't eligible for the breakfast, because otherwise if we say it,
Right,
it's
if you're only
total of
eligible-
60, everybody's gonna get it.
Right.
So I'll move it that you move it to the breakfast, lunch and dinner dollar amount,
And then have the total also.
right?
Yes, thank you.
Because then it keeps it separated.
so basically the policy itself was to set that we're gonna do per diem instead of with actual receipts. That was why it was presented separate. This is just how we derive at the number.
Right,
So the first motion is setting the rates.
so that was what I moved to set.
So it's moved by Cassie, second by James, question by the chair.
I personally think you need a per diem as a general rule, but I think you also need to break out the individual prices.
Yes.
Because one of the most nasty personnel things I've been involved with at this agency had to do with somebody that was, like a group of people coming back from a meeting. And they were there for breakfast and lunch, and they should have got back well before dinner and not been entitled to a full per diem. Instead of that, they spent an extra 2 hours sitting, in a neighboring town and having a lavish dinner so they could apply for the whole amount. I think that if you're traveling back from Buffalo and you're getting back here at 4 o'clock, you probably aren't eligible for dinner. For breakfast. So I think you need both in there. We can't do just the per, I think per diem should be the.
And I think that is in there. Am I correct that that is in there?
Yes.
And that the department head's
But
gonna
I think
decide
Sam
that.
was advocating for the per diem, and I think that's exactly right. That should be the default. But you still need the separate.
Based on eligibility.
And that's what
Department head
Cassie moved.
will verify.
Right.
The department
That's
head.
how I
will-
moved it. That's how I was trying to.
Mr. Hogan?
I think you're right.
Oh, my God.
I know, it does happen.
Oh, pretty scared.
Now, what do we pay your?
I would have to dive into that, Supervisor. I don't put that number.
The DSS, I don't have the number either, but the DSS reimbursements do get reimbursed. So that's not a county cost. So even, I don't see this changing a lot as far as the actual cost. The two departments that currently have the reimbursements to the largest degree are DSS and the sheriff's office. I think that will continue.
For the transport.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to increase what we're already doing. Just makes the process a little bit more efficient.
Not disagreeing with the concept, going forward, what's the methodology for setting the rate for breakfast?
It will be this until you change it again.
Right.
Which based on past experience, it hasn't changed in probably 15, 20 years.
If you're transporting a prisoner, you're probably not going to the old one.
Kind of leave it up to the county administrator and department
Come
personnel.
back to committee.
Bring that information
As
to us.
needed.
And I think it's good that we discuss it. I don't want anything automatic, because then we don't even know what we're getting.
And that's why I didn't, propose a employee handbook change here. I wanted to see if the committee approved it. If you were interested in doing this, then Danielle can bring that to personnel to actually change the handbook. And then I would have to have some conversations with our labor attorney, because it is spelled out in some of the contracts as well.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aren't you? That motion was on the rates.
Yeah.
You want the process changed too.
I was
I would like the
policy change over
policy change.
already?
Yeah, now we gotta go back to the policy. There we go. Thank you. Yeah, so the policy that I handed out, I think it was page 5.
Yeah,
We're on the back.
so it's not a buy meal.
Yeah, it's just to cross out that, the fact that we were requiring the receipt for the meal reimbursements. We'll just cross that part out.
I think per diems paid payroll is kind of the norm in the private sector. This isn't recreating the wheel. This is kind of something how it's done now. One thing that makes me more comfortable is, a lot of per diems you'll get in your check before you leave. This one you're gonna get when you get back. So we're not gonna be funding any money that you didn't actually earn. So that makes me feel better as well.
Earned or spent?
Yes.
Okay.
Livable.
So do I have a motion, second, moved by Sam, second, Daryl, James? Any more discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, then I would like to go back one page to page 4, which is the actual
We're going through.
voucher that we have. You'll see a lot of highlighted, confusing areas in the voucher policy prior to that, where we have a lot of crossed out, line 13, 14 and Act 17. So I'm not gonna go through all that. That's just amending the current form that we have, just to make it so that it actually reflects what the form is. What we're looking to do is just update it, take out which number, let me see, it's number 5 on the voucher form, which just spells out general fund, Department of Public Works, Pleasant Valley, Sewer District number 2 and other. Obviously, we don't have Pleasant Valley anymore. This is just to mirror the actual voucher that currently lives in New World. So New World, that voucher currently doesn't have those spelled out. So we just want to change that to clean up the form a bit. The voucher number, the fund appropriated is still there. That's just higher up in that number 1 box. So we didn't see a need to actually spell out general fund in those departments. If that makes sense. Sorry, I'm not trying to make this more difficult.
Well, and additionally, back to the validation on the bottom. The validation on the bottom.
Yes, so that's the last thing I wanted to address. The DA brought to public safety the request to change the very bottom of page 4, the actual voucher where it says department approval. It says the above services or materials were rendered or furnished to the municipality on the date and the charges are correct. The DA had brought to public safety the request to change that portion of the form. He had explained that if he has an outside prosecuting attorney submit a bill and they say that they have, I guess, spent 4 hours prosecuting a case, he doesn't know that that actually was the amount of time that that attorney spent on the case. So he didn't really feel that he could attest that that charge is correct. So I brought it to committee today to see if you have interest in changing it to what I have highlighted, which is just saying that the above services or materials were rendered or furnished to the municipality on the dates indicated, period, and then just take off and the charges are correct.
Dave? I understand why he wants to do it, but you're also saying that all your other department heads, you have to verify that he charged correctly, the company charged correctly. Well, but then take verification out completely. And they're gonna accept whatever the vendor charges.
Well, you would hope that any department head, if it was totally ludicrous, would never sign the thing anyway.
I would hope he would check it, but
Well, that's what I mean,
he does
so,
have to verify it.
but
Put down the
if
line.
they've gotten this far, you would think they were checking it or they wouldn't be to this point.
What if you reworded that and said seems reasonable? At least the department heads would have thought about it for a minute and said, well, that's within the realm of, probability. And He's not, I mean, no matter like what Dave said, either way, you're either in or you're out.
Yeah, and my feeling is that we expect all our department heads, if they have something, to sign off on it. It comes through the audit here. Each one of the supervisors signs off on the audit. We're just taking that voucher at face value when we sign off on it because we know it's done. So he should be no different. I don't know why he would be different than anybody else. The sheriff has to do it, we have to do it, public health has to do it. You know, all the other elected officials have to do it. You know, so I don't know why he should be excluded from it.
You mean Tony?
Tony, district
I
attorney.
think wasn't part of the argument because these are ones where the office has a conflict of interest. And he was trying to draw the line between his conflict of interest, so everything was being referred out. So how was he supposed to? If they didn't see any of the paperwork, how was he supposed to verify it?
Well, there's gotta be someone that can trace. I mean, you can't be paying someone. So what he's doing is passing down and saying. we
The
don't have
judge is the one
information.
that changed how they get billed. It
Okay.
used to be, it was set that there was agreements and a certain amount was billed for a certain type of case. And now the judge has changed it and now they, correct me if I'm wrong, and now he's billing by a
So-
per hour rate that the judge indicated.
Okay, so when we sign off on it as audit, right, we don't have that information. We don't know what it is. You know, so why would we sign off?
Our, if I may interject,
No,
our memo where we sent does read a little differently where he says.
Okay. I just don't want to, you know,
Different text.
Gotcha. but we don't know.
Correct.
I think the bottom line was it came up because of it being a conflict of interest case that was sent out and the judge has changed how he wants those paid. But every judge can, again, I might be wrong on this, but I believe it's because during the committee meeting, everybody was trying to push it back. And in the end, it appears the judge has to say on it. And it's the judge's court. It might not even always, I think, might not always be exactly the same. But it was like an 18B or a 1AB, something, there was some code that the judge was saying, that's how the gentleman was to be paid, which I believe was an hourly rate, and then when you come back, his question was, I can't verify how many hours. So how could he sign that it was all correct, because there was no way for him to verify how many hours were done. And it was no longer a flat fee, it had been a flat fee before, he's like, yep, that was a flat fee we agreed to.
So one of the things that we've got a whole handbook full of rules that we made because one person did one thing on one day. So one of the options that you could have as a board is to leave the voucher alone, not change it for a one-off, and just make an exemption for prosecutorial conflict cases only. There might be half a dozen in a year. Right, so you could make a separate process for that specific type of voucher and leave the voucher policy alone for everything else. So rather than change your whole policy on a one-off that happens half a dozen times, just address differently those specific types of vouchers separately and leave the policy alone. That's an option that you would have.
is it? I don't know if this is even possible, but if the judge is the one that's responsible for this happening, can we make the judge sign too?
We can make the judge do
They
it.
asked that.
Well, if he doesn't sign, they don't get paid.
They asked that in
You can't-
committee.
How's he gonna get someone to do it again?
They asked
He'll
that-
sign or they won't get paid again. Yeah, I have.
They asked that in committee and the consensus, the opinion was that no, the judges would not verify those. Because,
So who would ever take a job that the judge gave you again if you didn't get paid? That would take care of it.
no,
They'd go back to the old way.
I don't know if that's the way.
So the fact is, this voucher is not just used by the DA.
Right.
Right, so it's used by other departments. There are other departments that also receive bills that are based on hourly rates. The issue hasn't come up before. The claimant does sign this, saying that they're attesting that what they're submitting to the county for payment is correct. They're attesting to that. I guess, I don't know if there's interest in taking out that wording at the bottom. It would apply to everyone. If we did change it, I think, I would hate to see a separate rule just for one department, because it makes it confusing going forward.
Well, how
Or we
about,
just leave it as is.
what if what if for that department you had an actual voucher for those specific cases, is that?
We're
what-
talking about just
Right,
those types of.
those types, so he would use the same one for, but when there was a conflict, you have to use the other form with that extra, and you sign the opposite line that this is the date that this occurred, but I can't attest to whatever.
At this time, you let them just cross those words off and sign. You could continue.
I don't
to
think
do
you allow them to cross anything off. I don't think we want to allow that.
that.
but I-
You could have a separate.
You could have a
procedure for those
separate
vouchers.
line that if, you know, like you check a box that I'm not in control of this part, I can attest this is what I got presented. Something to that effect, but I don't know that I like changing it for, I certainly don't want the ability for them to cross things out, because then you get whatever people want.
Well, in our conversations before also, it was the department head is signing this form, basically saying, yes, I'm saying, use my budgeted money to pay this bill.
It's more budgetarily released than it is a process.
So this is more of a legal question. I mean,
Welcome.
I tell them, we're not bars.
you know, are we gonna use this form, hold somebody pecuniarily liable in an audit if we find in the audit it's incorrect?
It would most likely be the claimant, not the department.
That's already in the claimant's
Correct.
attestation, so what is the value
Changing.
of form, having that in the bottom?
And how are you ever, I guess I'm questioning, how are you ever gonna know if it's correct, right? If one person, or I'm just using an attorney, for example, does their job in 1 hour versus another attorney that takes 6 hours, how do we ever know what the correct amount of time is to perform that service?
You know, hopefully you get a performance appraisal somewhere along the line.
We don't get itemized.
Not for 18 daily, no.
And we get an hour.
If you get an hourly thing, that there's so many hours, but
But we can't.
how can I verify?
Mechanics have it, it should take 2.6 hours. It should,
Right.
I mean, it's all around mechanics and repair books.
So the person submitting the my point is the person submitting the voucher of the test.
Correct.
Is correct.
Yes.
That's the liability.
Correct.
The authorizing official.
So you're saying there's no liability
I
on
reviewed
the
this.
authorizing?
And go ahead and bill it to my department. Well, let's just say.
We're gonna do just the DA, you have to do it for everybody.
So don't change it at all, leave it alone and let him just sign it.
Maybe the one sign, it's okay.
Maybe it'll work for DA's.
But we want changes to the.
Play the game.
There are other.
One big game, eh?
There are stylistic
It's
changes.
not on me, it's not on me.
Yeah, playing hot potato with a, yeah, doesn't make sense.
So then the only changes that will be made on the voucher are the highlighted towards the top, just to clean up the form. But the department had approval down in the bottom left, we'll leave that as is, we won't make any changes to that.
I'll make that motion.
Any discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Good job. Oh, we have the other.
We are.
I think we are, other business.
Oh, I'm sorry, we do have one other, this is attorney, salary increase, which was
We did
mentioned.
that.
Yeah, it was mentioned at personnel, right? We go through it here.
Oh, I don't know that we did that.
We didn't, I don't think we have to.
Was that? Yeah, that's what I like.
We just do.
To increase,
They used to, but they quit, just like they quit paying every. So we need a resolution and they said it had to be retroactive till
April 1st.
April 1st.
I'll make.
And you're worried about signing.
I'll second.
They motion by James, second by Daryl. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Yeah.
Carried. One day.
Right. You said the rate change is gonna take time, because you have to go through the handbook change and talk to some people, but is the policy gonna happen sooner for the overseas? I have a guy going to training.
So it'd have to go before the whole board, correct?
It wouldn't be till after the board meeting at the earliest.
So for now, you should be getting.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Was there anything else to come before the committee?
Other.
Yeah, I think on that. Is there?
Yeah.
You have another?
Would you like to
Okay.
talk about sales tax?
Chairman's
Subject?
gonna talk about sales tax, right?
Great.
Update on 8% sales tax discussion.
Yep, we did, you guys. Said we could do a talk more in Fairfield County. All one said that. And so I went and talked to. I several of my talked to Warren County, we didn't go, they came here. They are very in favor of doing it, they're gonna, pursue it at about the same speed we are. Probably need to make a next step without talking to the legislators. They probably will be our, that Saratoga County does not seem to have any interest in it. So if we win, it would be us and Warren County.
Saratoga County, currently is putting their energy into a possible increase to occupancy tax, which they think might be a little bit more beneficial for them. So that takes them out of the equation. And like the chairman said, Warren County is discussing this kind of the same as we are. They're gonna bring it to their finance committee. So I guess we're looking to see if there's still interest in us going forward. Whether or not that's with the board resolution.
I think the next step would be to ask our legislators if they're interested. Because it's not our decision, it's essentially a legislative thing. Have to see if our representatives are interested in carrying it forward for us, this sort of thing, but, I would be reluctant to go to the legislature unless we had something from the board saying, we are interested in pursuing this. I also shared with you today a new piece of paper that wasn't in the initial packet. And I'll throw myself under the bus. One of the things that you'll notice in the top numbers, there is an error in the packet that was handed out to you before. It's been corrected in here. And we've also, on the advice of the budget officer, I've taken the capital improvement money line out and moved all of that 1.5 million into the reduction on the levy. So the levy reduction, instead of being 4.5 million, is now 7.166 reduction. The error that was on the initial sheet, the town distribution amount in the first packet that I handed you out was the total distribution, which is an error because the only thing that should be taken into consideration is the increase. So the $3 million that was in the original packet, 1.9 of that is already being funded. So it's only the 1.033 that would be the new money to the towns. So I did two things on the sheet. I corrected that number to only the increase, put the capital money to the levy reduction. And because one of the most common questions that I get from supervisors after these meetings is how does it affect my town? Right, the initial packet I gave you took a blended rate for the entire county. This actually looks at the levy, how it will be spread out to each town. And then based on your assessed valuation that I know today, what your rate would be currently and what it would be then. And the savings on this sheet, that's also different from the original packet. I did for $100,000 because I think that's easier to wrap a conversation around. I think I had $150,000 in the original packet. I think for $100,000 probably makes an easier conversation when you have questions or if you want to talk to your constituents about it. You now know the impact on your specific town. And at $100,000, I think you can have more intelligent conversations when you are asked questions as well. Right, so the biggest deal I think is the fact that it went from 4.5 million to 7.1 million off the levy. That's an important note that you should know. And I wanted you to have those numbers, and the back of the sheet shows what the distribution to the town would be at those new numbers. Again, how it impacts your specific town. Commissioner O'Brien.
Making those changes in May, I think last time we were talking about roughly a 20% decrease in countywide sales tax overall. I think using that additional money to talk about, it makes a 30% reduction in, about a 30% reduction in the property tax to all the property owners and real estate tax in Washington County. And that carries forward over the next 10 years. You can also do the delta between what it is now and what it would be.
I don't know if you did that sheet again, but that would make a lot more sense because the impact stays on for the next ongoing.
So as long as your budgetary growth, to Mr. O'Brien's point, there is another sheet that I didn't share today. Just scroll of time. I took it out 5 or 10 years to look at what's the line where they converge, because the first packet I gave you said in 6 years, you'd be right back where you started from. What I didn't take into consideration was variables of the budget growth versus the sales tax growth. So if you can keep your budget growth at 2% and sales tax grows at least 2.5%, the convergence doesn't happen. Now, realistically, are you able to keep your budget growth at 2%? Probably not. I don't know. That's up to you. Traditionally, we haven't. Because just your salary increases will eat up possibly more than 2%. I mean, you still have your 2% cap that you can, you'll be able to tax money at, but there is a scenario. If your budget growth doesn't outpace your sales tax growth, the savings continues. If your budget growth outpaces your sales tax, they will converge at some future date. Does that make sense? I don't mean to conclude it worse, but that's how the math works. So some of that is up to you all when you pass your budget. Because I know one of the concerns was that if we have it, we'll spend it. It's up to you to make sure that doesn't happen.
In some ways, we don't have, we're still gonna spend it because all these expenses keep on going up. We're just spreading it over.
It's just a different way of retrieving it for the most part. If we had a way we could sustain different ways of making the taxes go down would be ideal. And the biggest advantage we have, looking at it this way, is using the county's money to fund our capital projects from the CHP money when it comes. But do we know if over time that's even enough to sustain capital? But right now, we're doing nothing to sustain capital, so that will at least be a help.
And one of the things that will convolute this is I will not waste your time today, is when that money comes, when the pilot money starts flowing into the county, we have to have another very important conversation. Because pilot money, as you know, affects your cap. So when that money comes in, you're all gonna have to decide, do you reduce taxes again? Or do you override the cap and take the new money and set the new level? So again, I won't bore you with that conversation today, but I want to plant the seed at least that we are probably at this budget season going to have a very serious conversation about the planned use of the CPE money. And more importantly, because we saw this fail at Fort Edward, the off-ramp for when that pilot stops. We need to plan today for what it looks like 30 years from now when that money is not that money anymore, right? So again, not for today, you've had a ton thrown at you, but just to plant the seed, we will be having an extremely important conversation about that pilot in the very near future.
And with the increases, it's Kevin's gone, but the sales tax cap, I mean, 2% is never equal 2%. It's been 3%, it's been 0.75% according to inflation and all those things. But just interest on borrowing money and things like that can put us over the cap before we increase tax at all, which doesn't make any sense, but they could borrow enough to do that. So that's a concern, and this would be the same concern. You change the rate, but the county's still strapped for cash. If you take that pilot and it's deducted from your cap and you can't increase. So there's a lot of variables here that are gonna be very interesting. Dana, I know you had something.
Ultimately, the goal is to try to take in more total tax revenue, correct?
Yes.
The idea is that you wanna keep pace with our costs, but in all fairness, I would like to.
I'd like to shift.
So the second question, 2 months ago, you said the good news was our sales tax continues to grow.
Yes.
The bad news is our expenses at the same rate.
Or higher.
Do we have any indication that we would ever limit our spending and growth of expenditures going forward? We haven't done it historically.
Historically, no.
So why would we think we were gonna do that going forward?
I see it more as a shift that you're putting it on sales tax rather than, so I wanna bring property tax
I see that as
down.
a rationalization. I don't see that as being.
I don't know if it's, I don't know
We're gonna
if
try to
it's
take in
possible.
more total tax. You're gonna spend more tax revenue. You're just gonna spend it.
Trying to, like, wrap my head around. So it looks like 110,000 savings on $100,000 value in the house. That would, right, correct, Al? Is that, or around 100,000?
For Jackson, that's the number.
Yeah, yeah. So if somebody has a $200,000 house, they're saving 220,000.
Yes, sir.
But if they go out and buy a $20,000 car with a 1% increase, they're spending $200 more on tax, right?
One time, yeah, but do you do that every year?
Well, I'm just trying to put things in perspective.
Yeah, you're right, that's the way
That
I'm
one
looking
year,
at
they
it
would
too.
wipe it out if they bought a $20,000 car.
I understand what Dane is saying, and I don't disagree. But the other side of the coin is that, and we've talked a little bit about this with healthcare expenses and so on, is that expenses are going up at a much faster rate perhaps than our 2% that we try and stay to. So another way of looking at this is that it gives us enough money to pay those extra costs without having to raise taxes. Or not having to raise them as much.
I look at another factor in there. We're an aging county. The tax burden is going on to people as it goes on to people who are on fixed income, lower income. And we're providing more services to that same group of people. If we can make a way to help offset those expenses for DSS, other services we do on office aging, Meals on Wheels, everything else that we contribute to. If you find a way to do that, take the relief and spread it over everyone instead of just on the people that are paying property taxes, aren't we achieving a better goal? I mean, I've been on the board 12 years. I really haven't seen us throw money away just for the sake of throwing money away. We have serious discussions about increase. We have serious discussions about who we're gonna hire. We'd love to cut expenses in some cases. In some cases, we really can't. How we cut our DSS is a very tough job now, even when we pay 25% of their expenses at the county level. We're getting unfunded mandates, Medicaid. We have no idea what the state's gonna do with Medicaid. That's gonna put pressure on us that we have zero control over. All the unfunded mandates that the state is pushing off because they need to reduce their expenses is being shoved to us. We don't have a lot of control over them. We need to find a way to help offset those on a more equal basis than just trying to pile all the burden on the tax, on the property tax owners, as well as our farmers, as well as our businesses. We need to help them relieve so they can continue to employ people and keep on going on. So it's a round robin. I mean, it's not just cutting taxes for today. It's cutting taxes to help anticipate how we're gonna handle future expenses that are control, that we don't have any control over. Look at our budget. How much control do we have actually on expenses? Now, you can answer that question.
It's in that sheet that you get with your taxes every year. Where's your dollar go? Is it like 18% is discretionary or something like that? I don't remember the number. With that little insert that goes with our tax bill, it actually shows the discretionary spending. And to Supervisor Scully's point, I don't want to sound counterminded or that I'm a sales pitch, but I did want to mention that you use the example of a sales tax on a car. So on a $50,000 car, as long as you keep that car 5 years, you still save money, right? Yes, it's a one-time more, but if you continue to save that $110, and if you keep that car longer than 5 years, you still realize the savings, right? I'm just pointing that out as not to be argumentative or a proponent. I'm just pointing out that over time, there's still possibly a savings. I did look at, so I did like a case study. There's a taxpayer that I'm familiar with that has residential property, vacant land, commercial land, business. Like their holdings are, they run pretty much the spectrum of a lot of what we offer. The only thing that isn't in there probably is agricultural exemptions, but, I looked at what his tax savings would be at 8%, and then how much he would have to spend out of pocket on taxable sales. And it was a significant number. And that's something that I would, talk to you about offline, because I don't want to, air any specific numbers around any specific taxpayers. But I just was curious in my own mind, how, because in my scenarios, I only looked at a residential property. And I really wanted to step back a minute and say, well, somebody in commerce, or, because our local businessmen, we want to protect as well, right? So I wanted to kind of look at somebody who had multiple types of holdings. So I do have an example of that. But again, that's something that you can see me offline on, and I kind of share those numbers.
So very interesting. I like all the comments because I don't like gimmicks. I want something that would be sustainable and get us in a better position going forward. I'm not sure I have enough information to get us there. Yeah. To me, the idea, the rationale is good, but if you can't fulfill the rationale, it's just an extra tax. I think that's where you were going.
We haven't ever filled that.
Right. But just by having this discussion, we may make better decisions on what we actually do too. Realizing what we are causing to happen in the ways that we do them. So, and we do have big expenses. We have the barns we're building for highway that we're not done, that some of those still need replacing, that aren't even thought up of yet. And we're gonna have to fund them in the future, and how are we gonna do that? So there's a lot of things on the table here, but the crystal balls aren't good because right now, everything's kind of gone nuts with inflation and the way things have turned out from what they were just 5 years ago.
When do we have to have a decision?
Right now, I think the chairman's just looking for your thoughts of going to, the next step would be discussed with the legislature, if there's even any appetite to carry them.
Yeah, I think my philosophy on it varies a bit from Dan. I won't talk about regressive taxes because he goes berserk and hates me when I do that.
No, I don't hate you, I just think you're wrong.
But essentially, every single tax, is regressive if you calculate it based on percentage. How the sales tax. So I think that's not even part of it. I think part of it is that we've got to do something about property taxes. Property taxes are really what's driving people out of New York State as far as I'm concerned. Funding the same sort of thing and taking off property taxes, I think has got a stronger effect on the lower income people, such as myself, an aged guy on fixed income. I can control what I buy. I don't buy a $50,000 vehicle. Pay $17,000 in my truck, actually. I don't necessarily go buy, high-end appliances. I'll buy more, and I might buy a store brand. I can control the amount I spend on sales tax. I can't control the amount I spend on property tax. So if we can elope,
Sure you can.
by selling property and moving out of state or
Buy a
going,
lower value
going
property.
to a nursing home.
There's people actually do that. They downsize after their kids leave home. I think we're considering.
Well, that's
You did.
certainly.
He might have downsized before that.
But you can't control your tax rate, the property tax rate, whereas you can control your spending. And I think that's a significant shift, whether we wind up spending more money in the future or not. And it's how much you want to spend. And I think that we all share the blame on what our spending is. It just feels more controllable, and I think signaling a property tax decrease, even though it's $100 for me, or so it's $500 for Jay, or whatever, it's still a property tax decrease. I think that's a significant thing to do.
300,000 might be the new normal now.
Next item.
I just wanted to say that, you know, when we look at and I'm gonna use Middletown as an example, okay? So we get many cars that come through from out of town. They stop and buy gas, they stop and buy food, they stop and buy, accessories for vehicles, whatever the case may be, as they go through our township. Those are all people coming from out of state, going through, using our highways, or be a county road or state road or town road. They would all be putting in additional monies that would help offset some of the fees that are gonna be passed on to our residents by what they'd have to pay additional for gas, or use gas as an example. And when the tax goes on, it just doesn't apply to Fort Ann, it applies for those that come through Fort Ann and Kingsbury, and then go up to Whitehall, wherever they decide to fill up that extra fuel. That's extra money that's generated. Yes, hopefully the downside would be they would be able to, and we have to restrict ourselves, and we have no idea, as Dana said, we could be as conservative as we want now, but the new board comes in 5 years from now. God knows what they could, you know, one way or another. And so, you know, but that gives us the cash flow to come in to hopefully be able to reduce those taxes, especially with our seniors and you know, those that are on fixed incomes. We have a whole market out there that we can tap and come in and they go through on a day-to-day basis that we generate no tax dollar from. So it's all on the backs of our residents. Or be our towns.
Well, we're still getting the 3%, we're just not getting 4%.
Well, yeah,
So
so we're not getting anything additional.
right.
Okay, so, you know, that's something to look at, I think.
You know, we're looking at, we've been really benefited by sales increase because of the tax paid by county on goods coming in from Amazon and everywhere else you buy. We've been benefited from that.
Internet sales.
Internet sales. When you look at way back when, this county did 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, all of a sudden, guess what? I don't remember the sequence. It was 40% tax increase one year, 30% the next year. And all of a sudden, that caught up with us. If we look at that, we look at our expenses going up, it's being offset by our sales tax. If we level off the sales tax, we're gonna have the same thing, we're gonna be 2%, 2%, 2%. Oops. Our rate's going up by 3, 4, 5%, it's gonna catch up to us again. How do we protect ourselves against that in the future? This is one vehicle to use to protect ourselves against in the future. We also have to look at the towns. What's the impact on the town? And help reduce maybe the property tax rate, increase Salem's got needs for sewer, Cambridge water. All the other sewer, I can't remember which, but we all have our different needs infrastructure. This way help finance it and make an impact on the towns also, not just the county. So we're helping at the county level, and we're helping at the town level. Infrastructure costs are skyrocketing. We're helping it as well as county.
The oldest thing we've had with sales tax is it's unpredictable. That is the scary part of, to me, in the budget every year, is the thing that you can not predict. Sales tax is the number one thing you can predict. It's gone down before. So even if you raise the rate, you can think you're gonna get 40 million and you get 35, you're in deep trouble. So it's a hard one to gauge. To me, we have to find a way to look at everything in a sustainable manner that's not a gimmick, that, oh, we got money today to be broke tomorrow. That doesn't work. The state does that periodically, well, weekly now, I think. And it doesn't work. So we just have to come up, if we're gonna go forward with something like this, a plan that we can make better decisions to make it sustainable and not be right back where we are. That'll be a problem for this. Anything else? Richard?
We can answer.
You do.